Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, November 1st. The time is 2:07, and I will call this school board briefing meeting to order. Board members, we have a lot on the agenda today. Several policies under executive services, Unity Charter School review, under academic services, Hurricane Irma purchasing update, and capital planning construction under business services, public comment and our comments. So we shall begin with policy 1.11, board meetings. Mr. Martin.
Yes, Dr. Kuckel, board members, this is a simple revision which was discussed with you at the last briefing meeting to revise the time frame within which the agenda for a budget hearing has to be distributed to the board to reduce that from 4 to 2 business days. That's the simple revision.
Okay. Is that it? Is that the only change?
Yeah.
All right. Board members, any discussion? Is it a consensus that Mr. Martin move ahead to approval at our
Yeah, this is
upcoming?
scheduled for public hearing at your November 14th meeting.
Okay. All right. We shall then move to plan for student assignment. Mr. Mark Mora and Mr. Greg Lurton. Not on. We need the microphones on. Microphones? Microphones are not on over on my left side.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Kuckel, board members, Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin. We don't normally have board briefings or board meetings on a Wednesday, so a little levity before we get started. Can somebody please tell me what day it is? That would be hump day.
That's right. It is hump day. Yeah, that's true.
All right. It's November 1st, too.
Any objections, board members? It is.
All right.
Approved.
Well, again, thank you very much. Layla and I, actually, Mark is not part of the presentation. Layla Muvdi and I are. Everybody knows Layla, correct? We are here to present the plan for student assignment for the 2018-2019 school year, the professional learning community, or PLC, the recommendations for this upcoming school year. So you had the 40-page document with the redlined revisions in it, and this PowerPoint just steps through briefly the recommendations the PLC is making. And what we will be talking about quite a bit for this next round when we begin in April for the 1920 school year. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. First, I know when we did this last year, I actually had not not started yet as director of planning. And there's also a few board members who hadn't started it either. So just a really quick history. The PLC is again, the planned learning community made up of school-based and district leadership. So we had principals from all the different levels, as well as district leadership as part of this PLC to discuss recommendations, revisions to the plan for student assignment going forward. And we started our meetings in April, went through the summer all the way up until, as you see this recommendation timeline to you now, where we made our presentation of these recommendations in September to the cabinet, on October 10th to EDAC, to DAC on October 18th, and then the briefing that we have today, ultimately to go for your approval at the November 14th board meeting. And so in summary, the recommendations that we will be making to you today, middle school arts, the application audition process, a revision of sibling and proximity preference weight structure, which we'll explain because that may be a little confusing, and just grammatical and date corrections and updates to the overall plan because it is for the next school year, 18-19. One of the non-policy topics is more of process, but we thought it was important to brief you and let you know about what we're going to be doing as far as staggering mailings of the Batch 1 open enrollment application process, that Layla and her team were very instrumental in helping with this, and then potential recommendations for 1920. So our first recommendation to be implemented in the 2018-19 school year was a middle school arts program application process, and this project team was led by Dr. Doug Santini, and the work group came up with this recommendation. Ultimately, what the PLC recommends is we started this as a pilot program 2 years ago. And basically, what we'd like to do for the 18-19 school year is make it more of a permanent piece of the plan for student assignment. It has been successful over the past couple of years, and basically it's setting aside, it originally started as a percentage of overall student population at the middle school arts, at the middle schools that have the arts programs. And over the 2 years, we've been able to tweak it. And essentially what it is, as you see in the second bullet, it will be added as part of the student assignment plan. The underselected schools, Oak Hammock and Bonita Middle, will have 20 spots available for students to audition for the art program. And the other 15, and the other schools, Cypress Lake, North Fort Myers Academy, and Veterans Park will have 15 spots. And what's important to note here is these are spots that each school gets, and this happens prior to open enrollment. This is prior to the lottery. So it gives students who may not have proximity preference, P1 preference or P2 preference, but still have access to that art school, are very talented in the arts, have an opportunity to go to that school. As I said, it's been a good pilot program the past 2 years, and we'd like to make that part of this plan.
Board members?
Yes,
Giovanelli?
Ms. Giovanelli.
Thanks. So would that be at the discretion of the principal, or how is that advertised? Like, how do we get the word out for those students?
Right, Dr. Santini and his team will be working with the principals to get that word out to the public, and that's what we've been doing the past couple of years, so that process will stay the same.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Ms. LaRiviere?
One question that occurred to me as I was reading through it, and I believe I'm on the right page. With this middle school students auditioning for art, it also talked about, as I read through it, it was discussing that it made mention of those high school students who come in the middle of the year would audition. That was not made there for middle school, so does
Correct.
okay,
Middle school
so-
does not currently.
Okay, so they will no longer, so once we implement this, beginning of the year is the only time, correct?
Beginning, and that's the way it is now as well, correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So that leads me to another question. I had someone contact me wanting to move from one school to, I believe it was Cypress High, and they were told from the school that they could audition, and then they were told at the district they couldn't audition. That's been corrected, and I say corrected, but they let them in. I don't know if they auditioned, and because I never heard any more. So I know that they got in, but so like what happens? They were told they were going to have to wait till January. So what's the protocol there for that? I think that needs to be a little more maybe defined or explained to people.
I think that's working.
For high schoolers, they can audition at the first batch, the first enrollment, and they can also audition on the in July for brand new families. But during the school year, there is no other auditions. Now, if they come from an art school from another state or county, they can directly go to the arts program. If they've been in an art school, they can go directly to the art school. But we don't have, the schools don't do auditions in the middle of the year.
Right. So I think that's what she got in. So I'm assuming that she just didn't audition. They just accepted her background and history from that. I guess I'm assuming.
If she's coming from an art school, we can put him in the art school. If she has a letter saying that she was in an art school that did auditions in their county, we can enroll him directly into the arts.
Okay.
But if they don't come from an art school, they can also go to Cypress High, for example, and enroll in that school, in the regular school, and then auditions in January and then turn in there. They can take those classes as an elective classes, not as the basis for the major for arts.
Gotcha.
So they have other options.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Any other questions? Mr. Toiber?
Thank you, both of you. I saw this presentation actually at DAC, and one of the questions that was raised at DAC that I don't know if we formalized it, and to the rest of the board, not so much even for the changes, but just overall in the process, that once we do the selection process, it's based upon availability. Once that process gets done, people get put on a waiting list, and the waiting list continues until the first day of school. At the first day of school, the waiting list gets eliminated, and then it's a matter of you call as it gets available. And the question was raised to the community, and it seems a pretty logical question. Why, if the list is established and you're in a waiting queue, why does it get eliminated so you have to call? And the reason why I say that is because if you're not working, you can dial for dollars all day long and see if a space opens, because it happens momentarily. If you happen to be a working parent, you're not going to get a chance, and so it really puts certain people at disadvantage. And so I didn't know if there was a mechanical reason or a policy reason why we eliminate that waiting queue that we've established prior to school when school starts.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. When we started student assignment, we used to have the waiting list all the way to December. So what happened is after school starts, we start finding out that when we call parents from the waiting list, they decline, because after they start in the school, they love the school, they love the teacher, they don't want to transfer. So what happened is at the very beginning, we have all the way till December, and we find out that the longer it is, the more they decline. They don't want to be. So we find out that the more seats come available after the first 15 days of school, so that's why the waiting list goes all the way to the first 15 days of school, not the first day. So the first 15 days of school, when they do the do not return or do not enter to school, they withdraw the kids that don't show up that were assigned to a school, and that releases seat, and we call the parents. That's when we have the high percentage of parents accepting a seat. Usually after the first day started and the child started in the school, most parents decline. We get one seat. I have a school. I don't want to say the school, but the principal called me and says, I have one seat and you have a waiting list. Why are you not giving me a parent? We called 20 parents on the waiting list, and 20 parents declined. And that was their first choice. And they said, no, I went to the open house. I had a meeting with the principal. I love the school. I met the teacher. So what I find out in my experience is parents, if they start going to that school, they love it. They don't want to transfer. So we don't want to be initiating calling parents until December. That's why we close it at 15 days. And we want it to be an option that if you are happy in your school, you're no longer on the waiting list. If you're not happy, then you call us and tell us that you're looking for a seat. We work with them. Let me tell you, when a parent calls me, I have a parent calling me every day. And every single day, finally I found these seats, and I'm like, I got it. I'm like, I'm happy to get rid of this one phone call a day. But those parents can email us or can call us. And they usually call the same person, so we know who are looking for what. So when you see that seat, you call them right away and you tell them.
Gotcha.
Now, the reason we ask them to call us is because we cannot make favoritism. If I have 3 parents and you stop calling, like I have a parent that have been calling, and then all of a sudden she stopped calling, and I'm assuming she's happy now in the school, so she doesn't call anymore. I'm not going to initiate that phone call if I see the seat, because I don't know whether she's already happy, and we want to keep those kids in the underselected schools or the schools that people want to get out. So that's the reasoning.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Dr. Atkins, if you would get the answer to the liaison for DAC, or maybe Ms. LaRiviere can bring it back at the next meeting, the 15 days seems to be reasonable for that reason, and I think once we give that rationale, I think that would suffice. So thank you.
Not a problem.
All right.
Any other questions? All right.
The second recommendation that we had to start with the 2018-19 school year was revising the weight structure of sibling and proximity preference. And so the current weight structure, and as the PLC, as we talked about this briefly, there was just discussion, well, we thought it was the way that we are recommending today, but it wasn't. The current weight structure is sibling preference and sibling guarantee, and those two words can be confusing. They are currently the highest and equal weight in the plan as it is now. Then it's P1, which is a student who lives within 2 miles of the school, proximity, and then P2, which is within 2 to 5 miles. So what we are recommending as the PLC, the recommended structure is the sibling preference is the highest weighting, and that is an enrolling student into a school who already has a sibling at that school. That kind of sounds like guarantee, but the way that it's written, and we'll look at changing the terminology of it as we go to this next school year, but that is sibling preference. Followed by the P1 preference, the students that live within 2 miles of that school. That just makes sense. They live there, they want to go there. It helps transportation costs, and that's what we've always been pushing. Is if you want to go to your neighborhood school, your proximity school, you have that weight. then sibling guarantee. And sibling guarantee is siblings with the same address, guardianship, applying for the same school at the same time. So these could be two new students who are just brand new to the district, or they're applying to go into 6th grade together. So that is the sibling guarantee. Then P2 preference, the student lives 2 to 5 miles from the selected school. And in the documentation, I believe it's on page 11, you'll see the hierarchy of the weighting as it goes through there. Then P3 comes in as well too. But that's the recommended structure from sibling and proximity preference. So it's not a proximity-based system yet. I know we had a couple questions about that at DAC. Oh, we're going to proximity this year. We're not going to proximity this year. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But that was the second recommendation that we had for you.
Board members? Ms. Fisher?
Yes, so on the sibling guarantee, how does that impact blended families who may come together during the school year? And they're all living in one household in the same place, but they have not, and they may or may not be officially blood related, but
They have the same guardianship.
yes.
If they, if they have the same guardianship, they live at the same address, they're enrolled. If they fall under that they'll be considered sibling guarantee.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, board members?
All right. So those were the two recommendations that will actually be written into the plan. They're redlined into the plan as you have. And then we wanted to just briefly talk about two other topics that are not policy or not part of the plan. They're more they're process related. And the next one is staggering the batch 1 open enrollment mailing process. Everybody knows, at the end of January when we open our doors, Layla, early in the morning for that first day of open enrollment, there's a line out the door. It's crazy. It's pandemonium for that first day, that first week, rolling into the second week, all through open enrollment. And it's a constant challenge, and Layla and her team and working with the PLC have come up, let's see how we can make this better for our families, for our employees, for everybody, for all concerned. And this is something that we're going to try, and basically it is we will be mailing out the first point, and Layla, she's not kicking me, but she will if I don't start with this. It is still open enrollment, and a high school, an incoming 9th grader, 6th grader, or kindergartner can enroll anytime during that open enrollment period, that end of January to end of March. This is just, we are mailing out the pre-printed applications. So our students who are either in our pre-K, district pre-K programs, who are in 5th grade in the district, or are in the 8th grade in the district, we know who they are. We send them a pre-printed application for them to go ahead and enroll their students. We're going to send the high school applications out first. And that's in the hopes people get it, they'll come in, and it will be, the thought process is we'll have more high schoolers coming in to enroll. We will definitely still have elementary students and middle school students, but we're hoping that this will help stagger some of that rush. And then we will mail out the elementary and middle schools a couple weeks later and handle them as they come in too. It's not a preference that we're giving the high schoolers, hey, high schoolers, you're going to get your choices first before elementary, middle. It's just when we're sending out the applications, we still will serve and help everyone who walks through that door and applies online, obviously. We're just staggering out the application process. We also have things that we're working on just as people come in and how we check them in when they come in, so we don't have to have, one of the goals that Layla has, and you can speak to it, is just people wait a long time. We want them, to cut down that wait time. And this is one way that we're hoping to do that, and in working with Lauren and her team to get the message out to our families as best we can.
Board members? Mr. Teuber?
Another issue that was brought up, that's something for the board to consider and maybe discuss. Currently, teachers, if you're teaching in a school, you get priority for your child to be in that school. However, there's sometimes, for example, if you're teaching in a high school and your child's in the middle school, you still have the issue, you still have to go get your child in the middle school. Is it something for us to consider that teachers get proximity preference to where they work in that school for their children or close by their school to alleviate some of that stress? That was brought forward, whether or not that could be considered. So I'd bring that out there for the board. And
Usually, teachers, if they want to take their child to their school, they apply for an employee waiver. And that's usually a given if they apply during the first enrollment period. So if they know they're going to have an incoming kindergarten and they do it in January or February or March, we will give in that school. If it's in a different level school that you don't work there, they can apply for a hardship waiver. And I'm going to tell you, I take that very, very seriously because I want to benefit our teachers. I know for the superintendent that is a priority to help our teachers. And I tell my teachers when they apply for a waiver, I say, I'm going to do everything possible to put you there. Unless that school is over capacity, I'm going to impact class size. I usually give the teachers the benefit of, because it's helping them. Now, if they're asking for a school like Edison Park, and they're out of zone, and that school is very small, and we have a waiting list, I have to take into consideration the whole picture and not do something that is going to put us in trouble. But most likely, if they ask for a school closer to their work, we're going to try to help them, and most likely we will approve those waivers to benefit
Can
the
you take that back?
teachers.
Yeah, great.
Anything else?
All right, and one last slide is a potential recommendation, and Dr. Atkins will probably say this is not going to be a potential recommendation. He's hoping there'll be some form of recommendation for 2019-2020, and it's a revision of the current student assignment zones to more of a proximity-based and/or smaller assignment zone system. This had the largest project team within the PLC working on this, and we all know there are challenges with our current plan, but our current plan is also pretty successful as well too. You've seen the statistics. 84% of this last open enrollment period got their first choice, and over 95% got their top 3 choices. But we do know some of the challenges. There are a lot of choices some of our families have when they are selecting an elementary school, especially. The cost of transportation we hear over and over again, and honestly, you see the 40-page student plan for student assignment. It's complicated, it's a little confusing sometimes. So we're looking at potential solutions, and what has come up is a proximity-based or smaller zone system. The goal is we have, if you look at the spectrum, neighborhood schools on one end, our current system on the other, where can we find a happy medium and still provide choice in that world-class education that we've dedicated to our students and families. So we're looking at all of these. We've been doing a variety of different technology models using GIS and how we, what our current situation looks like if we just had a proximity-based system now, or 6 zones, 7 zones, what have you. The biggest part of this will be, once we have a couple recommendations, is getting out to the community, our business community, our families, very importantly, into the schools, and doing the stakeholder and community engagement piece of that, which we've already started with Dr. Carlin, and lining that up once we really know what the current situation is, our current state, as Trey Davis would like to say, and then move forward with that so that we can come to you this time next year with a recommendation, whether it's proximity or smaller zones.
And that makes a lot of sense, I think, to all of us. So we'll look forward to those steps along the way. Ms. Morgan?
If they're smaller zones, I would assume for the high school and middle school, that means that we would have to add more programs, the attractor programs.
That's possible, and there are a lot of different factors to look at, because the initial recommendation is that we roll this out for elementary first.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Anything else, board members?
I have some general comments, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So your commitment to student assignment is very much appreciated by me. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a nostalgic story about why I love Layla so much. 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was considering moving out of New York State, where public education system was failing my children, my very first contact with the Lee County School District was Layla Mufti. And she started me down a path of changing my view of public education, and she helped walk me through every step of the student assignment process. And frankly, it was the information she provided me about our system of student assignment that sort of forced me to choose Lee County over Collier County, because student assignment is so important. So Layla, I love you in a very appropriate way, and you're fantastic. And I know that your job is very, very hard, but I have deep appreciation for the difficulties that you deal with on a daily basis. So thank you. The other things that I heard today are a continued focus on the arts, by making sure that we have our talented students being given preference at our art schools. I think it's important for us to continue to focus on the arts. Coming from someone who doesn't know anything about the arts, I believe that that is a very important component of public education. And Greg, your focus on getting the word out to the community is huge, because during my campaign, I spoke to a lot of people about student assignment, and they just didn't understand. Once they understand the process, they probably don't love it as much as I do, but they embrace it and they understand the benefits of it, including our realtors. And I think we discussed this yesterday. They are our front line in terms of getting the information out. And so I'm very appreciative that you're taking the time to get out to the community and discuss those things. So thank you both very much.
And I support that too. Sometimes our realtors are our worst enemy because we have not communicated with them and people don't like it and they don't understand it, and so that makes their job a lot harder. So pulling that group together is really critical. And I'd add too about Ms. Mumfty, every time I refer somebody to her, they email or call me and say, thank you so much, she's wonderful, she does the job. So, and you didn't even know Ms. Patrica was going to be a board member, did you?
Ms. Patrica didn't know she was going to be a board member.
I just thank you for the process. Because as I've spoken with parents, and I say, can you please just trust the process? And invariably, it works all in their favor. Some things just logistically won't work, but that's okay. We can't always give everybody what they want, but we can provide them the best education and the best place for their child. So I just thank you for your flexibility.
And I'll just build on that. The plan that you see in front of you obviously was created a number of years ago in the PLC. It's a group effort in revising and putting it together, but it is Layla and her team that put it into practice every day. So.
One more, if I may. The changes that I'm seeing today are in response to public concerns. And that's the thing. This is like a living, breathing document, and you're constantly getting feedback and changing it in the way that's most appropriate for our community. So I'm just very appreciative. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I'm a realtor that explains it, and people do have a hard time. And where it becomes a problem is when they come in the mid-year. That's where it hurts them, and they don't understand that they can't get Edison Park in October. You know what I'm saying? And so explaining that is a little difficult, but I mean, it is a process, and I like the choices, and parents need choices. That becomes a parental control, and that's what people need to be responsible and parenting their children. So I think the choices is great. That's what makes Lee County great. So I like it. So I love the
I want to say that when parents move here late in the year, if they live within 2 miles of a school and they didn't get that school, I want them to apply for a waiver, because if there is a way for me to put them in that closest school, that's one of my goals, my personal goals. So I try to put them in a school closer to them. If I cannot give them that P1 school, maybe I'll give them the other closer school, but I want them to be able to apply for a waiver. There is always the option of a hardship waiver. Now, I want to mention that you got to help us with, because we're going to get some parents upset that they didn't get their letter, their pre-printed application. When the neighbor high schooler get their pre-printed application and I got a middle schooler and I didn't get mine, they're not going to understand. We're trying to work with communications to have a good communication with the parents, but if you hear from parents complaining that they didn't get their pre-printed, you need to tell them we're trying to do better. You're going to receive it in a week. Just be patient, because they're going to come up, and then that is going to defeat the purpose of staggering the batch. So I want your support and your help with the parents when they complain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, board members? I would add one other thing that I have talked about many times, and that's as we make smaller zones, smaller choice zones, that we're very careful about our low-income areas. I have said over and over, there is nothing educationally sound about putting all low-income kids or all minority students in the same school. And I know we're compensating, Dr. Atkins, thank you. We're doing a lot of things with those schools, but what you cannot replicate and duplicate is the rich conversation that takes place when you have a cross-section of children and everybody's a part of that, as opposed to children that come to school with a shorter vocabulary and not the experiences that other students have. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we try to be economically frugal with our busing. We have to, on the other side, weigh the educational components of that.
Exactly right.
All right, anything else for This group. All right. Then we shall move to district management and selection of instructional materials. Thank you very much for all that
Thank
you
you.
do. Mrs. Ralph and Dr. McCullers.
Good afternoon, board members.
Good afternoon.
Feel like I should do something humorous after Greg has been up here. We're bringing forward policy 2.18 for a briefing this afternoon. Dr. McCullers and I are going to address just a few parts of policy 2.18, and this is from our legislative update, basically from House Bill 989. These are things that we need to add to the policy. There are just a couple of things that we really need to address. The first thing is on page 2 of the policy. I will say this policy has gone through a lot of revisions over the past several years. Mr. Martin has been very diligent to make sure that we kept this policy up to date, and in fact, we've added some things to this policy ahead of requirements that were needed. On the bottom of page 2, we made an addition a few years ago that helped us to get a little bit ahead of the game, but one of the things that we do need to add here is that each semester we will be required to have a hearing. This hearing will be to address materials that have not gone through the instructional materials adoption. These will be materials that are used in the classroom that have not gone through the adoption process, because we know schools do adopt or do use materials and purchase materials with their own monies. Now, we're trying to streamline those materials where we're using more district materials because we do have mobility of students, but we do want to be able to have that opportunity for parents to object to those materials. The next thing that we have is on page 3 at the top of the page. The House bill requires that the district maintain a list of current adopted materials on the district's website, but I will say this was where we were already ahead of the game because we already maintained that list. But the House bill did require that we put this into the policy.
There's another provision in the new bill that requires, after adoption of a new material, that there be a hearing conducted by a hearing officer who's not an employee of the school district, not an agent of the school district, to give citizens a chance to to petition a problem with the adoption or with the material that was selected. So we've added that in.
Okay. Board members? I think we're all pretty much aware of the new rules and regs and appreciate having that put in where appropriate.
Are there any things that we need to add, any other additions? Because we did want to pre-brief this and then it will be briefed.
Ms. LaRiviere?
I'll save it for later because it really does not deal with this policy, but it's related, so I'll save it for another point.
Thanks. Anything else? I guess that's it. Thank you for your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Now we move to academic services, Unity Charter School of Fort Myers. Mr. Coates. And Dr. McCullers, are you?
I might stand by to help them out. Let's see.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
Grab a microphone.
There you are, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is George Coates. I'm the principal of the Charter School of Fort Myers. And I'm here to briefly go over our plans for improvement for this upcoming school year.
Either there's something wrong with the mic or you're speaking
Yeah,
too
yeah,
softly.
Yeah,
he's
move
coming.
closer.
It was
right.
off. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We've collected all the data that we could and that we could come up with and created a comprehensive plan for improvement, looking not only at our qualitative data, but also our quantitative data. A good qualitative data analysis can be useful in providing a narrative to our quantitative data, not answering not just the why, but the maybe. Here's an example of our quantitative data or measurable data. During our Cine Days this summer, we took an entire morning to go over our data and our scores and studied, how we fared. We also discussed the school grade and how it was calculated. Knowing what we know now, we're going to be using the Florida Continuous Improvement Model as our vehicle for success and to move forward. We created 3 SMART goals for improvement. The first was to use the MTSS model with fidelity. From that, we will be offering GAP to students after school, which includes transportation. Our second goal was to increase the achievement level and proficiency by a minimum of 3%. Our last goal was to increase the number of resources for science. We're looking for any advantage and anything we can do to make science fun and exciting. And we're in desperate need for materials for our kinesthetic learners. So we're wanting to equip a lab. Looking at our qualitative data, the one thing that really stood out to us was the amount of teachers that we had that weren't credentialed. So we've made some adjustments, but we know that our ultimate goal is to have 100%. To make improvements in areas that we believe indirectly improve our school and ultimately our scores, we made these changes. We've changed in our programming. We've made sure that we had grade levels that had common planning, and we've also updated our technology infrastructure. We also went as far as changing our bell schedule. We increased the number of instructional resources and also put technology in the hands of our students now that we have the infrastructure to be able to handle it.
Great.
Using a best practice approach, we're now going to do some progress monitoring by using the STAR testing to set data points, and we're also going to be setting non-negotiable benchmarks based on those data points. And we will make sure to make a point to check for understanding after giving any big ideas or introducing any big ideas. To support our framework for success, we've developed calendars and timelines to ensure that we're on pace on where we need to be. These calendars also help us schedule out meetings needed to roll out new initiatives or in discussing old problems that we need to resolve. I appreciate the time to talk to you about our school.
Board members? Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, I just like a context a little bit. Where have you been? And so that I know where your goals are taking you. What's your population?
Okay. Where I've been as a person or as a school?
No, as a school.
As a school.
Yeah, academically.
Academically, we were a D this year, 9 points from a C. The year prior, I believe, we were a D as well. And the year prior to that, we were an F school.
Oh, okay. All right. That
We
helps.
are a prep and fitness school. We've changed the name last year. We went under a new management company. Celerity was our old management company. Step Education is now our new management company, and we changed the school name to Unity Charter Fort Myers. I took over as principal January of last year, and this is going to be my first year as full-time principal there.
Thank you very much. That helps.
And how many years has the school been in operation?
I believe,
That's a good question. Maybe 7 or 8 years, it seems like. And under several names.
Okay, all right. Ms. Patrica?
What is the demographic makeup of your students? Did you answer that? And I,
no ma'am, I did not. We, I believe, are 91% low socioeconomic group. So we're one of the highest in all Lee County.
and then, Dr. Atkins, what supports or partnership opportunities do we have for charter schools? And are you taking advantage of those partnership opportunities?
Well, I'm going to let Dr. McCullers jump right in after I just make a few comments. First of all, we have Dr. McCullers and his team that do meet regularly with our charters. We've also recently added Shelley Taylor, who is helping us with really progress monitoring and trying to make sure that our charter students are on the right pathway for graduation. We've recently extended, and he has Mr. Coates has graciously started to attend our principal meetings, so we certainly welcome that partnership and that collaboration. I will say that several of our charter school principal partners joined us for that meeting, and they seem to integrate right in. So hopefully you felt welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Because we definitely want to see you at every one of our meetings, so we can improve that communication and partnership. So,
thank you.
Dr. McCullers, if you want to add to that.
Not much to add to that. Obviously, we do make available our professional development programs to their teachers, and we assist them in grant proposals and in school improvement planning when it's necessary, and we try to have a good school.
Ms. LaRiviere?
Along with that, I appreciate the fact that your desire is to getting all of your teachers credentialed. I believe that's critical, because then it shows that they care about improving themselves to be the best that they can be. Are you collaborating? Who do you collaborate with for assistance with helping them get those credentials? Is our human resource collaborating with you to help you connect?
Yes, ma'am. All of our teachers are vetted through the process of coming into our charter school, and then with the state, they give us a statement of eligibility and what steps our teachers need to go through in order to get that full credential.
And I appreciate the fact that you're going to be focusing on that MTSS process. I really believe it helps our teachers zero in on just exactly what strategies the students need, which ones are the most effective, so that we can scaffold them and assist them along in their learning. And just a thought to consider, because I believe that curriculum's within the child, and you're elementary, correct?
K through 8, yes, ma'am.
You're AK8, that's what I couldn't remember. If you're dealing with the younger kiddos. That curriculum is in the child, and even though we say this is where we want to be by a certain time, we want to go there, but at the same time, we also need to be sure that we're not missing the pieces they need to have in those earlier stages. Because if they don't have those, if you skip over some of those pieces, it comes back to haunt them later. So I just appreciate the fact that it looks like under your leadership, you're trying very hard to put in place the protocols that are necessary to help the students succeed. And I have just one question. What is your English language learning population? Do you have several students coming in who have not fully acclimated to using English and literacy?
We do, ma'am. There are a number of students that still we have to test and monitor to make sure that they're grasping the English language.
Okay.
Great. Anything else? Just a couple logistical questions for me. How many students do you have, and where exactly are you located?
We're located at 4740 South Cleveland Avenue, right behind the Dunkin' Donuts there.
Okay.
And little plug for Dunkin' Donuts.
Good landlord.
We have about, right now, we're at 286 as of yesterday.
Okay. Well, we wish you the very best and keep up the good work, and we'll be eager to watch the data as it comes in.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McCullers.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we now will move to business services, Hurricane Irma purchasing update. Ms. Millay, who else is coming up here? Mr. Frederick, Moss, Mark Mora, Jimmy Flock. Is everybody coming? This is going to be a big panel. It'll take about 20 minutes to set up.
Well, and also, just not to pick on him, but I believe this is Mr. Ross's first board briefing. So we are looking forward to this presentation like none other today.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Atkins and Mr. Martin. We're here today to provide an update for you on Hurricane Irma purchases. And again, I'd like to welcome Mr. Frederick Ross. He is our Director of Procurement Services. He joined us in June, and we are absolutely delighted to have him here, and he did a great job supporting the emergency efforts we had this fall. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Mr. Moore, would you kick us off, please?
Thank you, Ms. Millay. Good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, board members. I'd echo the sentiments of Ms. Millay. Mr. Ross has been a great addition to our team. We particularly appreciate him in operations as we look at our construction phased approach and procurement processes. He's been a great asset in us developing new processes and programs. I won't belabor the point in regards to Hurricane Irma. I think we all understand the impact it had on our community. While it was not historic in intensity or strength, it was certainly unprecedented in its effect and impact on our school district, particularly with the number of days that our students were out of school. I believe it's 11 days, as well as the number of shelters that we opened during the storm to shelter all of the residents in Lee County, as well as its impact on our facilities. All of our schools were impacted in one way or another in various ways, as well as all of our ancillary facilities. And we continually thank Jimmy and his team for the hard work that they've done to restore and recover. And his continual response was, it's our job. That's what we're here for. So that humble approach to doing their job is very well noted. Other things that I want to point out before we jump into the procurement process is the emergency operations plan that we had in place. As we start to debrief the storm and our actions during the storm, we've learned a lot. We've learned that we need to improve a lot of things communication-wise, command structure-wise, and we're working in earnest on all of those things. But I will point out that we had very good articulation with a lot of our strategic partners, particularly the EOC, the first responders, all of our municipalities, so we know we can build on the strength of those relationships already forged. We also had quite a few of our partners in construction waiting in the wings to help us recover. And we're very fortunate that we had that partnership because it helped us recover much sooner than we thought we would be able to. And again, in addition to Jimmy's help and his staff's help, it was a yeoman's effort to get us back into school as fast as we were. And also, we have to note the heroic actions of all the folks in the district, not just in operations, not just in maintenance, but in the schools, the principals, across all divisions and departments. It was certainly a team approach to recovery. So we are very blessed to have that. As I mentioned, debriefing continues. I joined Dr. Atkins and Ms. LaRiviere out in Lehigh to talk with the Lehigh Planning District in regards to a command center there and how we can improve communications and actions in our east part of our county. That, along with Bonita Springs, we know that there's some opportunities to improve the way that we interacted, the way that we partnered with the recovery there, as well as the preparations. And as you'll see in the next slide here, we already mentioned the damages that were incurred in a lot of our facilities. And a lot of these required some emergency response in order to bring back online in such a fast track approach. And again, due to Jimmy's hard work and his team's hard work with our CMs and all of our other vendors, we were able to restore all of these. And if you look at these pictures and you go back and visit these facilities, they look nothing like that right now. And that's the amazing feat, to recover that quickly. It's as if it didn't happen. So with that said, I want to turn it back over to Mr. Ross. They want to share the process that we use to purchase some of the emergency services that we had to in order to get back in shape.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Moore and Ms. Millay for those kind words. School Board Policy 1.18 and 6.07 define the communication and reporting that's required after emergency actions. The first step is superintendent declares an emergency state exists. That second step, the superintendent may choose to suspend competitive solicitations for the procurement department. The third step is what we're here today to do. We're reporting and sharing with you the actions that we're taking after the effects of Hurricane Irma. And then lastly, on November 14th board meeting, the superintendent will be bringing a recommendation to approve the expenditures for Hurricane Irma. September 6th, school and school activities were suspended by the superintendent. So beginning that time, September 6th through September 24th, will be considered the emergency purchase time period. From that date of September 6th through October 23rd, an estimated $19.3 million was spent on activities related to getting the district back in operation status after the hurricane.
If I could interrupt.
Yes.
Is some of that covered by insurance?
I think we'll get to that.
Yes, we'll address that topic in just a moment.
Okay.
So this next slide summarizes the expenditure by the major categories. I think the main takeaway from this slide is the $14.8 million, which represents about 70% of the total spend, was done on contract and on bid. And the three key areas for this is, number one, procurement department had contracts and bids in place prior to the hurricane that could help support the emergency efforts. Number two, as Mr. Moore mentioned briefly, our contractors and our vendors were there. They were mobilized, even calling us ahead of time, asking, how can we support, how can we be of service once the hurricane passes? And then thirdly, the maintenance and operations staff utilizing those contracts and utilizing those vendors to help assist in getting the district back in order.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kuckel, for the lead into this slide. So the question arises about insurance and FEMA activities. So the district has submitted 55 claims to our insurance carriers, and our process for proceeding with the claims will be for the district to make the repairs that are required and provide the information about the costs to the insurance companies, at which time they will evaluate the claims and apply the deductibles and reimburse the district for those expenditures that they deem approved from the insurance carrier. Those, next slide please. So those items that are not covered through insurance are eligible to be reimbursed by FEMA. So the district proceeded with filing a claim for public assistance on September 18th. We have received from FEMA on October 14th approval to proceed with filing claims, and the next steps will be for their representatives to come on site and evaluate what was done and to review the costs, the receipts, et cetera, and to make a judgment as to how what they will reimburse on top of the insurance. So it's important to note that it's not known at this time what the insurance and FEMA reimbursements will be. We are using capital and general funds to pay for the repairs that are going on right now. Next.
So next steps. Again, on November 14th, there will be a superintendent recommendation to approve these emergency expenditures. As Ms. Millay said, we do not know all the costs to date, so there will be more coming, and per policy, we will bring those expenditures to you for approval. Any questions?
Board members. Ms. Fisher and then Ms. Patrica.
Okay. I just want to thank you, as with many of our other departments, for all of your work behind the scenes and your quick response in keeping everything up to par. You've done a great job. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Patrica.
Mr. Ash, you did a good job. So we're going to be approving the expenses or expenditures that we know today, and then at a future date, you'll come to us with other expenses as they arise, correct?
Today's briefing is to share the information with the board, and on November 14th, we will bring a request forward, or the superintendent will bring a request forward for you to approve those purchases. So I will break out the purchases into two categories: those purchases that were off bid and those purchases that were over $50,000. So typically, any purchase over $50,000 that isn't exempt is brought before the board for approval before the purchase is made. So we're aggregating all of the data and bringing it forward for the board to take action and approve that. Based on the declaration of the emergency by the superintendent, we follow the policies to make these purchases and are notifying the board and asking on November 14th for approval.
Okay, but the second item there says not all costs are known today. So you're not asking us to give you blanket approval for all
No.
future costs. It's
No.
just the known costs up to this point, and then at a future date, you'll come back to us with more expenses,
Correct.
right?
So,
Okay.
so a good example of what an unknown cost might be is we have several schools that require roofing repairs. So if we peel back that roof and find more damage than was estimated, the cost of that we have presented to date would increase. And so we would follow policy to brief the board in the appropriate way, either by memo or by a briefing, to obtain, to notify you and obtain any approval that's required by policy.
Couple things. First off, I see the 19 and change million, and I'm good with that for the repairs of the coverage. My concern is, as you know, some of the East Coast schools are still waiting for FEMA from 12 years ago. So I'd like to have addressed, we need to find out where that 19 million until FEMA comes back, which may be this year, next year, or 5 years down the road, where that money's coming from is what I need to know, and I'm sure you have that addressed. But more importantly, we had asked for, and you'd provide us the revenue loss that happened as account of the sporting events throughout the district. And why it's so important, especially during the football season, is that the football season, the gate revenue, the parking, the concessions covers all the other sports, JROTC, band, everybody. And I got the revenue reports, and it was, how much they lost in cross-country, football, volleyball. And I got those school amounts, and the total was $144,000, but I don't even think that includes how much they lost in the parking revenue, how much they lost in the gate draw. Even the makeup games, because they had them on a Tuesday or a Thursday, they didn't get the money that they needed. And so, I spoke to a lot of principals, and of course, and I love our principals. Everybody's fine, everybody's good, we're going to make it work, because they just don't complain. But us as a board, we need to make sure that they're covered. And, all of these funding, trickles down to everything we do, JROTC, the band, all the clubs. I would really like, if this board, concurs with me, for us to get active numbers as far as what our districts, what our schools need to finish out this year appropriately, so that that this hurricane does not negatively impact our students through this academic year. Find out what that cost is. I know we can't get, Dr. Desmore's already tried to get it with FEMA, and they came out and told us we can't get there from here. Okay, well, we tried, but I still believe we still have to come up with that number some way, and whether we go to our community and ask for help. But the first thing I think we need to do is ascertain how much we need for all of our schools, both, predominantly high schools, but it trickles down into middle schools as well. And I just wanted the board to weigh in on that and see if they support what I'm asking for the superintendent to do, and that for us to be able to address.
Well, I think that's really important. Board members?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I'm just curious, when do you know when FEMA is going to even come here? I mean, do y'all have a timeline or anything?
Not at this time.
Oh.
Yeah, and insurance has to be done first.
Ms. LaRiviere, did you want to say
No, just that they have to go through the insurance process first.
We are in the process now of putting together documentation for FEMA, and I believe it's November 4th.
Oh. so-
December 4th.
Oh,
December 4th.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
thank you.
Is it appropriate for us to stay in touch with Congressman Rooney and other federal elected officials who've reached out to the district to let them know the urgency of the situation?
Yes, I think that's really appropriate, and I think Congressman Rooney would appreciate, being kept up to date so he can help us represent us at DC. So, yeah, very appropriate.
I have a couple of questions. What percent do we anticipate that we'll get back of that 19 million?
It's difficult to say because first the question is how much will be covered through insurance, and then after insurance, how much is covered through FEMA.
So it's a possibility that we could get close to 100% when you combined insurance and FEMA? Maybe not a probability, but that's the intent? I mean, that's what
That
we'll
would be
submit
our
for?
our best hope, absolutely.
And I have one other thing. I thought I heard you say that we had contracted with some folks prior to the hurricane coming through. Elaborate on that. In anticipation of the hurricane or for other items?
I'll share a little bit, and then I think I'll ask Mark to address a little bit as well. So we do have contracts in place that address emergency debris cleanup. So it says in the event of emergency, we have vendors on contract. We have emergency repairs in several areas. And in addition, several of our community partners reached out to us in advance, many of them who are on contract, and shared with us what their plans were, what material resources they had, and what personnel resources they would have staying in the area. Now, of course, the storm impacted many families and many left, and we did determine that some of those that we would be relying on were not able to come and assist us. So, Mark, do you want to touch base a little bit more on the support we had from our business community?
You did a great job explaining. We leveraged the folks that are on a continuing contract program. A lot of them did, prior to the storm, knew that we'd need some recovery assistance and did reach out. They reached out to the operations team. They reached out to Jimmy. So we're very appreciative of them. Then again, this is the first time we've ever gone through a storm of this magnitude. There are things that we want to improve as far as how we work with our vendors going forward with emergency planning, but in this particular case, we were able to use all the folks that we've had great partnerships with in the past and under contract.
Can I be just a little bit more blunt? You all are nice and diplomatic, and I appreciate that. But I think that something that's important for board members to know is that some of our contractors that we do have under contract did really step up to the plate and did a yeoman's job in terms of coming forward and helping us, whereas others that were under contract and who really solicited us hard for our business just basically did not have the time to come out and help us during our time of need. They were off on other priorities, and I get that, but then one of the things that happens sometimes is when they don't get what they think is their fair share of the dollars, then they start to criticize. And we had to open schools, and so we had to rely on our maintenance department. We had to rely on some of our contractors who did step up to the plate early on so that we could get schools open on time. Had we waited on some of these other contractors, we could not have opened schools, in my opinion. Yeah. So there's going to be some, I hope they don't, because in all honesty, I think they knew, that we had to do what we had to do. But there, some will say, well, so-and-so business gets more of the lion's share of our business. Well, that's because they had materials in place, they had personnel in place, and were able to help us during that critical window to open up our schools so that we could get them open by the 24th. Had we waited on these other contractors that were off doing other things like helping the county or off in literally all other parts of the state working, had we waited, we could not have opened our schools on time. So I don't know if you've heard any of that, but in anticipation that you might, I want you to know the full story.
Ms. LaRiviere?
And just picking up on what you were saying, Dr. Atkins, today I was at the Uncommon Friends Foundation's luncheon for their finalists for their ethics awards. Ironically, two are in the construction industry. It was amazing. Irma came up in a lot of the conversation. But one of the pieces that they said is they talked about RFPs. And when they send the RFPs, they not only just look at who's got the best price, but look at the integrity and the ethics of the company. And many of them said, both of them said, we chose to take a loss to make sure we were helping our community. And I believe that that says a lot for those who are serving us rather than someplace else. I believe it really gives credence to you look at the RFQ, and yes, somebody may give the lower bid, but they weren't there when we needed them. So I appreciate all of them. I don't know how to tell them, but I appreciate the fact that they were willing to do the right thing and put our students first.
Ms. Morgan.
Okay. I would like to ask if the board concurs that there be some sort of periodic report on the insurance reimbursements and the reimbursements from FEMA, particularly if we're going to be talking to Rooney. We want to have, a fairly up-to-date idea of where we stand. And it doesn't need to be a presentation, just a written report, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other thing I want to say is, the community has been effusive in its praise of us and what we did for them. And you're talking about what some contractors did for us. Is there some way for us to publicly recognize or acknowledge those who stepped up on our behalf to help us recover from this? I mean,
We would be happy to do that, sure.
Okay.
We will put that list together. I didn't mention specific names just so I didn't want to leave someone out, so we can certainly work on that and publicly acknowledge the help that they give, because there were some that did really go over and above, and I certainly appreciate their efforts. We couldn't have opened without them.
And that might be nice to do during a recognition at our regular board meeting.
Correct.
Well, I'll kind of summarize to say, while you have mentioned that there were things you could do better and in the future will do, you certainly did an amazing job without that information. When these only come every 10 years, it's hard to be totally prepared, and even if they came more often, it still is. But we got back together very quickly, and I hear from everybody how well we served the community and our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Another little item, Lehigh was mentioned in terms of our debrief efforts with other cities and municipalities. We are going to be meeting with Roger DeJarlais on Friday to start talking again, just a follow-up conversation that we'll have regarding hurricane response and recovery. And we had intended to have county staff come out and work with our principals, but we decided to cancel our principal meeting for the month of November because they're all real busy and with the hurricane and everything going on. But we are going to reschedule time for them to be able to debrief with those principals so that they want to do that, and I appreciate that, so we can have a better coordinated effort next time, which hopefully won't be for another decade or so.
For sure.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. And now we are ready for our capital plan and construction updates. Dr. Desmond.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Atkins, members of the board. We wanted to come today. Of course, we have had numerous conversations about the capital plan, but we wanted to come with a deeper briefing about the capital plan and give you some updates about certain process improvements that are going on and process changes that are going on, get some consensus about how we plan on moving forward, and talk a little bit about all the new schools that are coming up, the financing related to those, and some of the things that we can look forward to within the next 10 years or so related to what our capital plan looks like. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Letcher, who will take us through some facts related to the capital plan.
Good afternoon. So in your backup, you were provided with two capital plans. One is the approved plan that was approved during the budget process. And in that plan, that meets our the needs within our current budget, what we can do. It has the new schools. It starts on page 68 of your backup if you wanted to follow along. In this plan, it talks about the new schools in the east and the west zone that we're planning, or east and south, I'm sorry, that we are planning to do within the next 5 years. And for those schools, it also includes new COPS. You can see that on page 68 in the revenue part. Under debt proceeds, you can see the new COPS that is built into the plan to cover the cost of those schools. So in that plan too, it covers what we can afford basically. Then on page 72, the next plan is our needs plan. This is the plan based on what our needs are in the district. And in this plan, if you look on page 72, you'll notice that the new COPS funding is not built into it. And if you also look down on the bottom of page 72, you'll see that it's out of balance by $477 million. So there's a big gap there on what we can afford and then what our needs are and what we can't afford. So what's also included in the needs plan that's not in the approved plan are things, let me get to that. So like I said, there's no new debt. There's also increased maintenance cost in there. So right now, our current rotation cycle is what we can afford to do. The plan includes a rotation cycle of what our real needs are. In your backup, that was also included so that you can see what that new rotation cycle would look like.
So just to reiterate that, we've talked about the capital plan and that $478 million shortfall. This plan, this needs plan, really lays out how we get to that number. It looks at all of the schools that we have to build into the plan. It looks at all of the needs related to maintenance, related to technology, safety, academic and program and athletic program enhancements. All these things are built into that plan, and so it is the plan, and I think we discussed this at the last workshop, and Mr. Toiber said, hey, we need to be able to show where are we falling short, where do these numbers come from. Absent any other funding source, including any additional debt, this plan you could take and show and say this is where that $478 million comes from.
So one of the things I also wanted to point out is in our budget book, we have a section on debt, and this is in there, but I just wanted to point out, as you can see right now, this is our current look at our debt. So if you look at this, you'll see in 17, it went up, and that was the Bonita High School. We took on new debt from Bonita High School. Going forward, what our debt could look like, and this is just one scenario, but going forward for $316 million is what our need is. If you look at the debt on the brown, that's our current debt. Taking on new COPS for the future things, you can see that we go up from like $45 million to $61 million in 2026. So it's about $15 million more in debt that we would be taking on to fund these schools through COPS.
So if I can, just to point out a couple things related to these two looks. On the current debt, this same chart is in our budget book on page 86. So this information will come out new and updated every year with our budget book. So if you compare, you'll see that starting in 22, you really see a significant reduction within our current debt, and it continues to go down. Now in this look, starting in 22, that's where you see the spike of the debt. This is just one look at how the debt could be structured, and basically we do it that way on purpose. That is, when we see an amount rolling off, we structure the debt so that the debt service is smaller in the beginning and gets larger going off as you see old debt rolling out. And so this is just one way that it could look, but you can imagine a scenario in which, based on our current growth patterns, and if we continue to grow out into the future beyond 29 and 30, and at this point, based on our survey that went to the state, based on all of our state projections, we see no reason why we would not, right? We'll continue to grow. And so absent anything else happening with our current revenue sources, even though you see a big drop in this in 29, there would be no reason to expect that we wouldn't still having to, to build schools at that point. So probably having to take on additional debt at that point bringing those levels right back up. Okay, so we're going to see a pattern going forward, absent anything different happening than is happening right now.
Board members? Mr. Toiber?
Dr. Esmore, I want to thank you for doing exactly what I asked to do, and I think that it's critical for this board to know, to be able to project to our community that there's a gap of $500 million. And I mean, it's not illusionary. It's not something we pulled out of the sky. This is the cost. You know, we did it before when the crash hit in 2007. We changed all of our, world-class practices of repair and replace, our inspection routine, our cycles of our buses, our HVAC, all our major components. We kept stretching them out, stretching them out, stretching them out. And as we did that, our capital costs, of course, went down, but our operational costs went up exponentially. It's just not a good way of doing business. And so, putting it back the way we need to run our ship, the proper way, this is the price. So our public needs to see that, and you can be pound wise and penny foolish, and not do it the right way. But at the end of the day, the stuff has to get repaired. And so, we're going to spend more for these type of things if we don't do it right. So I appreciate the fact that now we have the information to do it right. So.
Thank you.
Board members? I think there's a misconception out there when we cry wolf and we say we don't have enough money to build schools, and then we build schools. I think the public doesn't know that the alternative is that we have to borrow, and then you pay interest. And I think those figures of $45 million a year in principal and interest, money that could be going into our classrooms or technology or other updating our buses, now is being used for principal and interest. And that's a real travesty, but I think our politicians don't see that. They see us cry for money, and then they say, well, you just built a new high school, and you're building this school, and you're building that school. They don't see the trade-off being borrowing money, paying interest, and paying principal. And somehow we have to get that across to them, because if we couldn't build schools, that would be a different story. If we were putting all of our kids in portables, that would be pretty evident, but it's not evident when we continue to build schools.
Well, the other thing that we need to keep clear is that the more of our capital outlay dollars that are channeled towards servicing the debt, even if we're borrowing, we have less that we can put toward maintenance of our buildings.
Right.
And so then, that starts to add up. Once the maintenance starts to add up, it is way cheaper to maintain an asset than it is to replace or repair a broken asset. So that's the other piece that I think we have to bear in mind, is the more debt we have to service, the less that we can do from a maintenance perspective.
And to couple onto that, Dr. Atkins, all of these assets that we have, and we have, a huge amount of buildings, 117, 118 buildings that we have, those are taxpayer dollars. Those are our money that the taxpayers have already spent. For us not to repair it properly and maintain it properly is being fiscally irresponsible for this board. So we understand that, we get it, and so this is the numbers that we need. And so I'm not ashamed or abashed to get out there and saying this is the gap that we need to address, and we just need to get with our public so they understand it. So.
We sort of interrupted your presentation?
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
we'll get back to it.
No problem.
The poster that was created of that slide that you have
Yes.
that shows the decrease in capital and the increase, I brought that to Senator Pasadomo's office today, and I just sat it across from her while we had a conversation about teachers. And when I finally explained to her what it was, her mouth literally fell open. She could not believe that was the relationship between student growth and capital funding. She also approached me or raised the issue of the fact that she had heard that we were not managing our money well. And I explained to her our bond rating and the fact that we're above the average for school districts across the country, and that it is our financial health that makes it difficult, because we are maintaining our schools and we are able to build more schools, makes it difficult for us to acquire the funds we need right now without going into a debt spiral that will make it impossible for us to maintain schools. And then we'll have schools that look like parts of Ohio, right, where you walk into the schools and you're just sad to be there because they're crumbling and they're falling apart. So I don't know how to get that, we can only sit with so many people, and I don't know how to get that message to them, and I don't understand why we have a reputation for poor financial management when we are doing better than the average district across the country. So,
Because it
Mr. Glover, and
serves,
then
it serves their political purposes. Yeah.
And thank you, Chris. It gives a great segue, and I was going to talk about it in comments, but I was on I think it was Facebook or some medium. I might have even been just regular surfing on the web, and a box popped up for miamiforever.org. And I encourage all the board members to go to that, because it's a very comprehensive website that came up in a box, and I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure our Trey and his company could, if they can do it, we can do it better, because we've got amazing people. And the miamiforever.org had all of the information. You click on it and tell why they need to have that bond amendment, why they're pushing it. It has to do with the flood relations and their water issues. You can read it. Not so much that we're going to support their bond amendment, but the process that they did, and the fact of where to go to get more information. I mean, it was a really well done website that I believe we should consider doing something like that to get that information out. And my question to Dr. Martin is that, can we do that legally, to be able to do that type of informational thing to show our capital plight?
Yes, and I think you might be considering or thinking about the restrictions that are in place with respect to advocating the passage of a referendum.
Correct.
Which would apply also to a bond referendum as it does to sales tax. And there are restrictions there, but you can always provide factual information. There's never a prohibition against doing that. It's the advocacy that in some contexts is limited, the advocacy in the context of saying vote for.
Okay.
But you can always provide factual information.
Ms. LaRiviere?
Piggyback on what happened with your time with Senator Pasadomo. I believe that we have people in political office at various levels and points that they pick up they make a sound bite based on something that they heard on the news, or took a little piece and they've turned it into a sound bite. And so we even have our political representatives sharing that sound bite to people in the public. And so part of my goal is in the process in the next, scheduling is very difficult for us right now, but to make sure that I meet with them and I talk about that, because I will gladly say, come with me and we will spend some time and you show me where we have misused our money. You show me where the problem is. Where are you getting your information from? Because I can't find it anywhere. And I really believe we need to start very gently and kindly holding people accountable for comments that are made that are many times inaccurate.
And that's a very good comment. That's an easy thing to say. Well, when you spend your money wisely, and you're just turning it back and saying, well, you be specific. And they can, but it's an easy excuse, and then they walk away.
Exactly.
And then that spreads. All right, we interrupted you.
Sorry.
That's fine. Actually, you all led right into my next slide, what does the current level of funding mean to us? So, of course, that means that there's new debt for the $316 million that we're going to have to take on within the next 5 years to build the schools we need. Our maintenance rotations are at the basic levels. We have some safety upgrades that our schools really need, some access control, some cameras and things that really would be beneficial that we are unable to do at this time. We have some technology needs. We have some infrastructure improvements that could take place that could help out, and we can't afford to do that right now, along with things like purchase of buses and building upgrades that you all have all discussed, and those are areas that at the current funding level we're unable to do. So then where do we go from here?
Just a simple example, and please correct me if I'm incorrect here, but the swipe card system that this building operates under is using it has a very antiquated operating system. We cannot add additional swipe card stations to open access to the building, like let's say this door that's right outside your area, if we wanted to swipe card access. We can't do that because we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We don't have the the dollars and the technology, to put the technology into that, effort that we need. We have a similar circumstance out at some of our elementary schools. I know, Pat Hayhurst has been working diligently to try to get some swipe card access for, places like playgrounds and so forth, so they get in and out easy, but yet it be secure. And that's been a multi-year process because we have not had the budget to fund that in a way that we really should have been able to do that 5 years ago. We haven't been able to because of budget constraints.
So where do we go from here? So first of all, we start by questioning and reviewing our current process and reasonings. So, and we've been in that process, as you know, we're looking at it are we doing it because we've always done it that way, or are we doing it because it's what's best for the district? And in that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark so he can tell you some of the things that we've found that we've made some changes.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon again, Board and Dr. Atkins. 2 short months ago, on August 28th, I believe I sat in front of you in regards to a budget update for Benita Springs High School, and Albert Einstein popped up in my head, and his quote or definition for insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that came true as we started to look at our construction process or phase, or the process in which we construct schools, but more in depth looking at the systems that actually support the construction process itself. And I'm talking about how we fund projects and how we procure services. So to that end, we start to dig back into the Benita Springs High School project itself to see where we needed to make some process improvements, as well as looking at some recent projects for schools we've constructed over the last 10 years. So Amy, if you would hit that for the next slide, please. Some of the things that we uncovered is that are we really true to the processes that we had in place, or did we have true processes in place? And one of the things we want to talk about is planning and constructing a school does not begin when you hire the architect or the CM. It actually happens 10, 15 years prior to needing that school. You're actually looking at where your growth is. Do we have the property to build the school, where the growth is occurring? Are there anything that we need to consider as far as mitigating the property that we have? How long does that process take? The Army Corps of Engineers, Southwest Florida Water Management, all of those things need to be taken into consideration far before you consider bringing on a design team. So we started looking at long-range planning. And Mr. Blurton's team is looking at that right now. I think they presented to you in the past in a briefing our property inventory, where we plan to build schools, where we need them into the future. So that's really step one. Step two is looking at where we are as far as the land mitigation. What are the things that we need to do as far as due diligence so that we can build onto those properties when we need it? And I think we're also looking at that process. I won't present it today, but we're starting that process. We're permitting and doing the surveys required for the next 5 schools. So when they come to you for approval, we already have that piece done. Now, how does that change things? You have to fund that ahead of time, not included in the total project costs as we've done in the past. You have to upfront put some of these costs out on the table and fund them. So that is one of the fundamental changes as far as a process improvement we're going to be making going forward. But the real opportunity is in the pre-construction phase. And I would like to say we had the cart before the horse on many of our projects. We were bringing to you as a board a total project cost before we knew exactly what we were building. And before that, we had our most strategic partners in the room helping us shape the school, what the concept would look like, and how much it might cost us. So that's where we really fell short. So again, that insanity that Albert Einstein was talking about, we were doing that over and over again. So if you look at this slide here, phases 3 and 4 are probably the most instrumental in improving the way that we construct schools and the way that we approach that. And we like to call that the pre-construction period. And you'll see the time frame, 5 years to 2 years prior to us putting a shovel in the ground. So very important that we keep this very tight timeline and have processes in place to monitor where we are in each of these phases. If you would, Amy, next slide. 5 and 6, we'd like to call that the construction / closeout of project delivery. Still a lot of due diligence is done here. You'll notice one of the things that we're doing on Benita Springs High School, and Scott will be giving you an update here shortly, we did a lot of value engineering as we were putting the shovel in the ground. And that really should be done prior to you breaking ground. You should be doing that value engineering at the design phase. So you'll see that missing in those particular phases right there. You know, that's also to include the move-in and the auditing of the project. Those are all important aspects of any construction process. And then we often think once we give the keys to the principal, we're done. We're not. So you turn the building over to the owner, you see how the building fits, how it works for them. Is there anything that in the design that we didn't consider or it's not there? Those are things that we need to have in mind. And lastly, that warranty period, that whole year we have after the CM leaves the job. You really want to uncover where there are any issues or outstanding things that need to be addressed. That is all part of the phased approach we want to put in place. If you would, Amy, the next slide. This flow chart, and I won't go through it with you right now, but this is the pre-construction phase process flow that we're proposing using going forward. This was developed internally with internal partners, particularly procurement and finance. And we have new resources in procurement, particularly Mr. Ross, who came from Florida State and worked a lot of construction projects. He was helpful in recommending some key steps here. But I also like to point out that we went outside to develop this phased approach. We worked with our consultant, Wright Construction. We also worked with model districts. We looked at higher ed, and we asked, what does this process look like to you? Any suggestions, any recommendations? And this, I will tell you, is still a work in progress. There are only 4 swim lanes. This is basically design, construction, and our owner's reps. Those are the district folks that work on our projects. We are still developing and wrapping around this backbone for the phased construction approach, the procurement and the financing aspects, because those are key supports to this whole thing. And we look forward to briefing you in the future on how those things wrap into this process. What I will point out to you is at the end of this flow, you will see when you finally get to see the total project cost. Now, if you can imagine the insane way we did things before, we had that decision circle, if you will, or oval, at the beginning of the process, before you had your CM on board, before you had the architect on board. So what we're proposing is internally coming up with a not-to-exceed budget, and you're going to help us shape that. We want to know what your minimum design specs, your wants, your needs as far as the school is concerned. We'll wrap that into what we need for capacity, what we have for programming planned, and we will come with a budget that we want to work with internally, and we'll share it with our design partners. And we want to bring both the construction manager and the architect on board at the same time. What we've learned is there's a synergy between those two people in developing conceptual and design documents, and that's where you get your most leverage out of those folks in designing a school. So we're going to bring them on early on. They're going to be informed by, obviously, are the owner's needs, us, what we desire in a school. And also you'll notice there's at least 3 points in this process flow in which estimates are made, real time, and the last one is actually made with real subcontractor bidding input. So we'll actually know in real time what inflation factors are out there, material costs. Those will all be calculated into the total project cost that we bring to you for approval. So when I obligated our team to never come in front of you again and ask for an increase, that's how we're going to accomplish it, with a lot of due diligence, a lot of input from professional stakeholders, and not only that, putting accountability on them as well. When an architect and CM contract with us, they're also picking up some accountability to deliver the project in the way and at the cost that we prescribe. So this is not just a flow that changes the way we do things internally, but it also will shape how we interface with our partners, how we fund, and how we procure services. So again, this is just one small, I showed you that process prior to this one. This is just the pre-construction phase. We'll be developing and improving the way that we do all the other phases as well as we go forward. We're going to have a few opportunities here early on to pilot this, particularly with the Lehigh Senior High School Edition, as well as high school MMM. We won't be able to implement the whole process flow, but we'll be able to use certain aspects of this going forward and really test it to see how it works for us. So I'm really happy to work on the team that's developing this, and you know, I thank the board for imploring us that this is a system and process issue. You're absolutely correct, and we went to work, and I think you're going to be happy with the things that we're going to be doing going forward.
Board members?
So at our last workshop, we talked about the fact that Mr. Martin gave us ample time to look at our legal services and how they're structured at the district, and I'd like this to be part of that consideration. How do construction contracts fall in the district? To whom do they fall? Is it a board attorney issue? Is it a staff attorney issue? And what level of involvement should the attorney have in this process? I'd like that to be part of whatever information you provide to us, Dr. Atkins, if you could. And then my next question might be a little bit outside the realm of your presentation. It might be more for Scott. What level of presence do we have on the construction site right now? Is that part of what you're doing, Scott, for value engineering? Are you out there seeing, you know, a door is being placed in the wrong spot and you need to change that? Like, how frequently do we have staff on?
That's a great question, Ms. Patrika, and we're fortunate today to have both of our project managers, Steve Hanna and Tina Silcox, here, and they work under Scott. So we have a couple of resources on this particular project. Scott oversees the Bonita Springs High School project, but Tina Silcox has also been signed, and she's in all the owners' meetings. She's on site almost on a daily basis, reviewing whatever's occurring there. I believe the owners' meetings are really our opportunity to interface with not just the CM, but everybody on the job, the whole team, and that's where the accountability really occurs on the job. So right now we're resourced up, and we have all hands on deck for this particular project. We're lucky to have them on board.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
For me, can I applause? Because I think with this process in place and showing the community that it eventually will take care of what Senator Pasadomo says by this practice. So this is something that's much needed, and like I said, can I applaud? Because it's very applaudable. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank Mrs. Morgan for bringing it up way back to identify that it was a process issue and could we take another look at it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm taking out of this effort for the new process is that we have more pre-planning, we have increased communication and collaboration, that we're getting real-time cost estimates, which was a big issue, I think, with the cost overrun on Bonita Springs, professional input beyond our own walls, and that all adds up to much more increased accountability, which will give us the picture that we want to paint for our legislators.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Great summary, Ms. Fisher.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just to tag on, even though we know that were you not finished, Ms. Fisher?
I'm finished, thank you.
Tag on with that, even though we may be able to bring that cost back down to where we were hoping it would be, at least this provides a way so that there's more accountability, and it also helps when a new board member comes on, and I remember you asking, well, if somebody gives a bid, they should honor that bid. And the fact that, well, no, that wasn't part of the process. There weren't bids offered. And so by having all of those components in place in a logical manner, it's going to make life a lot easier. And I do care about our representatives, but it's going to make it a lot easier for our community and our taxpayers to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And as we're looking at our people, our architect, just a thought, it's not about what service they are providing. They need to think about, who am I serving? Who is this for? And if they put our children at the top of the priority list, it'll make a difference.
Anybody else? I have a question, Dr. Atkins, for you. I saw the figure $316 million. That is the difference between what we need and what we have. Are we going to workshop that? Are we going to talk more about that figure? Where are we going with that?
Yes, in fact, I believe even in this presentation, there'll be a little bit more information relative to where those dollars are going to come from.
Okay.
So they still have more that they're going to
But
do.
when we're pulling that figure together, what I also would like with that is after we borrowed $316 million, then what will our payments be? Because I think when we go to our legislators, we have to say, would you rather fund us up front, or would you rather $70 million every year of taxpayer money be going to principal and interest? What's your choice here? Because that's $70 million or whatever, it's going to be close to that or even more, is money that could go into anything else in our capital plan, our educational program. 70 million a year. Think about that.
Yeah, concur, and that's absolutely spot on. In this illustration here, this shows what that could look like, right? If we take out an additional, and the number here is $330 million worth of debt, this is where our debt service payments could be based on that additional debt, and it is right at close to $70 million, $66 million at its height, and probably will continue to be so as our growth continues, and we need to borrow more for additional schools. Yes, ma'am.
And I don't think our legislators have a clue about that. I think if they saw those figures, and that they would be appalled that out of school district tax money, we are paying that much a year in principal and interest. So I think that's something, as we go out to our legislators, that has to be on the table and say, this is a true choice you're making.
Well, and Dr. Kuckel, one of the things that chart does that Ms. Patrica was referring to is it shows the $200 million gap. That was, if you look at the loss of PICO dollars, if you look at the loss of the 0.5, we used to get 2.0 capital outlay or mill money, and we lost that. We also lost some dollars for classrooms for kids. That was part of the class size, and of course the impact fees were at that time were 100%. So the gap there, 2006, 2007. $318 million. If you fast forward to 2016, 2017, $118 million. And then if you're moving forward, the impact of 7069 is another loss of $5.5 million, that same amount. All of these things are negatively impacting our capital dollars, which means that we have to borrow more to make up the difference unless we come up with another revenue source.
Right.
Which means that we have less money available to maintain the schools we already have.
Right, and the other thing, yes, that's absolutely correct. And then the other thing that gets lost sometimes in the conversation is this is a human capital business. Students need talented individuals, and it makes it very, very difficult for us to attract and retain talent when we do not compensate like our neighbors do. We do not compensate like businesses and corporations. We want to go out there and talk about high executive salaries of the school district, but we never talk about high executive salaries anywhere else that are much, much, much higher than what we fund public education. We also don't look at what our partners how they fund, and they do have, we have 61 districts across this state that have a sales tax or some other form of revenue that we do not have in Lee County, and our students suffer as a result.
We have to be well organized with those points. Okay, thank you so much. Great work.
Sure.
And
Is there
we'll be
more?
talking more. Are you not finished?
Just a little bit more. So, so looking ahead, just wanted to let you all know, because I know this is one of the things that you all have talked about at this table before. We have a committee going to discuss the basically the size and the configuration of schools. How will they look moving forward? We've based all of the estimates that we've talked about now based on schools that look very much like the schools that we have right now. That might be different if we looked at something different, if it's beneficial for us to look at something different, because as Dr. Atkins said, and I think Ms. LaRiviere a little bit earlier, the first consideration is the children. So the schoolhouse should be structured based on what we think is the most educationally sound. All of the other factors come in secondary to that. So we're having a discussion related to that, and I think we're slated to bring you some additional information on that in the next briefing, or maybe the briefing after that. So So you'll be hearing more about that soon.
And I'm sorry.
Oh,
just
yeah, go ahead.
One thing, if you would go back there, one of the things that you always have to be careful of when you're making comparisons, and sometimes we're looking at the cost per student station, and if you start to compare cost per student station, Bonita Springs High School, which is about a 1,700 student station facility, to a 2,000 or above larger student station facility, we may not compare quite as favorably, because the larger you get, the cost per student station does go down. So if you build these smaller station facilities, you do have a little bit. I do feel pretty confident that we're going to fare fairly well across the state of Florida when you do start to compare that cost per student station. But bear in mind that we, in this particular area, because we lost all of the, the construction industry went up during the recession to the I-4 corridor. It did drive construction costs up in this area, and then we have that tremendous growth that pulls that off. So despite that competition, we still are doing pretty well. And then we had, 4 hurricanes that hit the United States that also drove up costs, but fortunately, it had a minimal impact on our project. So all these things have to be kind of factored in, but that size per student station and, the number of student stations in the facility is important in those comparisons.
Yep. Absolutely. And then speaking of where we get the money, which Dr. Kuckel alluded to a little bit earlier, we've talked about several different options here at the table, and so those are recapped here. But mostly where we are focusing on right now is the additional borrowing, the COPS, or certificates of participation, because in the short term with the schools that we have coming up, that is our option that is going to fund us these schools coming forward. So as we just to kind of go back and take a look at what that means in terms of the new phased approach that Mr. Moore referenced earlier and explained earlier, we're going to have to structure the borrowing how we've done it a little bit differently than what we've done before. As we're looking at the phases, with the long-range planning phase, there might be 2 or 3 different board agenda items that will come to you in order to approve funding for the different phases of the projects before, the last phase being the last and complete phase. So, for example, for our current project going on now with Bonita Springs, the long-range planning portion would have included that land purchase, and so that would be one agenda item. And then you have the project planning of the pre-construction phase, which would be another agenda item. In this particular case for Bonita Springs, that would have been about $4.8 million. And then, of course, the last the last agenda item, which would be the GMP, the largest portion of the project, in this case $69 million. So we are trying to work with our financial advisors to structure our borrowing a little bit differently than we have before, figure out what our options are for doing that, whether we can borrow maybe a little bit additional for one project in order to roll funds forward into another project, in order to maybe structure shorter term borrowings, 3 to 5 to 7 years for the first and second phases, and then do longer term borrowings to reimburse those first and second phases and fund the third phase. So those are all conversations that we are having with our financial advisors now, and we'll be able to bring a more complete picture. But in order to move forward with the projects, the next projects on slate with the Lehigh addition and the high school in the east, we will be bringing forward an agenda item very soon for the pre-construction phase of those. And I think that's where we end. So I think at this point, Kelly and I will vacate because the rest of the construction crew is here, and I think they are planning to give a construction update to you at this time on our projects that we have ongoing. So we'll move out so they can move in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice job.
No, you can run. You want to sit there? I think right, you can run that.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Board. Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin. I'm here to present the update on Bonita Springs High School for the Facility Development and Programming Department. I'm actually here, I guess I have the lighter side. I can report that we're on time and returning budget. So, our first slide is actually a drone video, which
I love the pictures.
I'd like to offer you all an invitation to come down and tour the site with myself and staff.
Scott,
But in the interim, we've provided a drone
Scott,
video.
can I interrupt? That was better than Greg's joke.
Oh.
Okay.
By the way.
Yeah.
Much better than Greg's joke.
We have the drone video here that one of our staff people on site from Gulf Point has been providing. Been a pretty good pilot, so it's our first aviation program on the school site. And I'll tour you through it as it spins through. You're obviously looking over the cypress hedge to the right of the picture. We're coming up on what is the stabilized base for the track in the football stadium. Bear with me. You can see it's a large area, a lot of dirt, and the ground has actually perked water pretty well during all the storm events that we've had recently. We incurred no damage at the facility following the hurricanes. You can see the outline of the baseball and softball fields being developed.
Yeah.
And our retainage lakes to hold on-site water for water management. We spin around looking at 75 and Imperial Parkway. It gets better as we get towards the front of the school in the back. And you're looking at the main entry at the bottom of the screen. That is where we're doing the connection point into the property. We're actually on Imperial Parkway at this moment, creating all of the turnoff lanes, working in the median. And here you get the front shot coming into the front of the school, the main entry. The structure you see to the right is the gymnasium building, which was stood up. The dark roof section is the administration main entry portion, with the classroom portion forming the upper portion of that T. And to the far right is the cafeteria building. Today we actually laid out what will be C, or the auditorium building and music building. The pad is being filled with dirt, and the actual layout for the foundation work began today. And we are spinning around to the back of the project, and you'll get to see the academy buildings. I know it's a little long, but I wanted to give you guys a flavor of all the work that's occurred out there and how we are maintaining schedule. And in the back is the academy wings. Academy wings right at this point now are sheetrocked. Ductwork is being hung. We're awaiting windows and doors, tighten up our systems.
Wow. Amazing. How much has been done?
A lot goes on there that you don't see when you're just driving by, so we welcome tours. Okay, we go to the next slide, please.
Just want to go through these.
Correct, and that's just our main entry to the school. So that building you see with the brick right there, that will be the main entry. We're starting to apply finish paints. We've picked the final outside colors. The brown sections you see are actually brick, earth tones of brick. The field will be white, and in the classroom building in the back you'll see we have panels that are a light brown that work with the brick that we've picked. It's really going to pop, and I think you're really going to be happy with the final product. Back wing, I just wanted to highlight the buildings as you see it. There's your academy wing for all the specialty academies. Up to the left you'll see where we have the cafeteria, and up by the front school you'll have the gymnasium. The good part. We came to you on August 22nd and we told you of a budget number of $62 million, and the final GMP came at $62,272,000. There's a delta there of $85,000. That delta is attributed to the storm inflation for labor and materials. There will be no increase, no request for additional funds, as we have that money encumbered in the total project budget. through value engineering savings, through tax savings, and other allowances. So I just wanted to show you how close we came, even with the storm impacts that affected material and labor, to getting to where we told you we'd be. Here's the big slide. You'll see the various amendments and the value engineering that has taken place on each amendment that we've been able to acquire up to this date. Right now, we have a total for all of the amendments, 1 through 4. We're working on 5 now that you just approved, superintendent signed rather, and we're at $1.956 million, and that continues to grow. We're forecasting hopeful savings of about $600,000 on C building, possibly, and hopefully another $400,000 on the D building, which is a sports concession and pavilion. So we're well on our way in our target that we had discussed with you previously. Next slide, please. Direct material purchases. We as a district, we take a credit change order from the construction managers, and we buy the materials directly. Right now, we have a total of $585,000 that the district has returned on tax savings. Our goal, a lofty one, is 1.2%. I believe we've only attained that once before, which would equate to about $750,000. I think we might be somewhere closer to 1%, so it's going to be between $650,000 and $750,000 when all is said and done. And again, that comes back to the district. So, okay. Next slide, please. So right now, if we take those two, you can see the value engineering of $1.9 million and the $585,000. That gives us a total return savings to the district that is back in the coffers of $2.5 million to date, and we're still growing. Next slide.
All right. Thank you, Scott. I'm back. It's still Wednesday. Senior high school edition. Just a couple slides here just to update you, because this will be coming to you on an agenda item to approve the budget for this edition at Lehigh. You've heard about this as a significant need. And just in summary, the addition that we are planning at Lehigh Senior is a 500 student station new building, and you'll see in the next slide where we have that initially planned to go on campus. But it is a 20 classroom addition, 2 floors, 8,000 square feet per floor, so 16,000 square foot total. And there'll be 5,000 square feet of existing for remodeling and renovation. You know, when you add 500 additional seats, you also have to look at expanding the cafeteria and other areas to accommodate the additional increase in student stations. So that also the outdoor dining addition that they have outside of their cafeteria to accommodate the additional students. Project timeline, and you see this graphic on the lower right. You'll see the existing campus and then just the sketch of where this addition will go on campus. When you see that start date of November 1st, 2017, well, that's today. Mr. Moore gave you a presentation on the pre-planning, pre-construction side of this. This is not, we've started digging on site and this building is going up. We have identified the need. We have identified how many student stations that we have, and now we are coming to the point where we need to give an estimated budget of what this will be, not total project costs, and start the process, a portion of the process that Mark presented to you just a few minutes ago. We do expect, with funding in place, and we start the process, that we want to complete this by December 9th of 2018, so almost a year from now. Before we go to Triple M, though, I do have an opportunity, and Dr. Atkins has always challenged me to say, and it's been a topic of conversation, this addition is needed now. Triple M is needed now. You know, we have all the additional schools that we need within the next 5 years. Dominic Gemelli and Debbie Camacho in the planning office are currently working on the forecasting and the numbers that we have for 18-19 when we go to allocations with Kelly and her team for this next school year. We are busting at the seams. The numbers just keep going up. And in our forecasting models that we are working with, our new model, we are analyzing that currently. We have about 3 more meetings to go, but we are within 0.04% accuracy. Variance, I'm sorry, 0.04. So the numbers are real. And we need these schools. We need this addition at all levels. So that's just, I'll get off my soapbox on that. But so the flag has been raised. Dr. Atkins continues to be raised. We need to fund these projects, and we need to start building these projects now.
Thank you, Mr. Blurton. You've seen a lot of operations today, so hello again. But I'm really proud of the group that we have here and the work they're doing. I believe we're seeing a lot of improvement in our division as well as some of our departments. So kudos to the planning department as well as facilities. High school MMM, another big project that we have we're working on right now. I want to give you an update in regards to current activities. Environmental surveys and permitting, we mentioned that early on in the phase approach. That is underway. They have been submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers, and again, that could be up to a 2-year process, but it's underway. Community engagement, we've learned from Bonita Springs High School that you must engage with the community, get their buy-in and support. So a lesson learned, we have already been out in the community. We've been with the Gateway CDD. We've met with a homeowners association. Scott actually went out there with Dawn Huff from our planning department. Very constructive dialogue they had there, mitigating some of their fears, addressing some of their concerns, and also looping them into the planning and design charrette process. We've reached out with businesses as well and the churches in Gateway. We are also anticipating working with Lehigh and Alva, since they will be part of that zone that will supply students to this new school, and we're hoping to leverage some of our schools itself to have those community meetings, much like we did for Bonita Springs High School. The phase construction process, we've mentioned that a couple times already. We're going to have the opportunity to pilot aspects of that phased approach in this project and to assess how it works and to tweak it if we need to. Again, going back to something that Dr. Desamores had mentioned prior to this presentation, optimal size is going to be a consideration. Right now we're thinking 2,000 student stations, but that might change. Programming as well, that's being looked at and developed. We had some conceptual ideas and we're fleshing that out as well, and I believe you'll be having that come to you in a briefing in some date down the line. Upcoming key activities, the architect contract. We're working right now on amendment to BSSW's original contract. They designed the prototype Bonita Springs High School. They're also, we can contract them with up to 3 reuses of that particular plan. So we're engaging with them and hopefully have a contract in Mr. Martin's hands to review before the end of the week. After that, the CM RFQ process. Again, we want to bring the CM on early to look at value engineering and be that second set of eyes as far as what processes we're using and bringing back to the project a lot of value. And lastly, the design charrette, and we're going to have quite a few people involved in this. This is where us as owners have input to the design and the needs that we have, as well as community members and other stakeholders. So that's where we are with high school MMM, and hopefully it's a successful one built on the lessons learned from Bonita Springs High School.
Board members. Mr. Tarver.
I like the plan that we're doing for Lehigh as far as the expansion, because I know it's needed, and you said you're busting at the seams. What I don't like is the inherent problems when you move to a school, when you add 500 capacity, you know, the learning center, the flow of the students. The expansion is not linear, you know, in administration, and I know we're probably going to supplement it with additional administration for the 500, but it becomes exponential. It becomes a harder school to manage and run, and I think we need to be very mindful of when we're talking about expansions of our schools that we get beyond that sweet spot where it starts becoming more of a beast that we want to handle. So I just want to put it out there, my caution, my concern. I know we need it, but it's going to change the culture of Lehigh, putting a 500 more, because that now brings it to a you know, not a mega school, but in Lee County it would be a mega school, and it will change that culture. And I just want us to be very wary of that and cautious of that.
Well, we have, and I absolutely do agree. We have engaged the principal, and Ms. Corey has also been very vocal about her need for additional staff, and so we will be, they are, I should say, working with the staff out at Lehigh to make sure that we get them what they need moving forward. So.
And aren't a lot of those students moving from temporary facilities that are already on campus, so it's just
correct. There is a portable campus out there currently, and so the goal in portables are not a permanent student station situation, if you will. So those, the plan then is those no longer will carry capacity for Lehigh Senior, and those students will, not those particular, well, yes, Lehigh Senior students will then move into the additional building.
Ms. LaRiviere and then Ms. Fisher.
Just a real quick question. what will it bring the student capacity up to at Lehigh Senior with this addition?
And taking the capacity out of the portables and then adding that new building of 500, the total capacity will be about 2,324 once that building is open for business.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Blurton, how many students do we have capacity for in Lehigh right now without the addition?
Right, the permanent student stations is just over 1,800. It's about 1,824 in that currently, and then plus the 300 portable seat capacity in the portables that they have out there currently right now. We added 4 portables to Lehigh Senior this school year.
Ms. Fisher?
So then, they're already 300 over enrollment, over capacity, so we'll be adding space for potentially 200 more kids than they have now.
Yeah, essentially what we'll do is we'll take that permanent student station in the existing building of 1,800 and adding the 500 to that.
Right.
And then, you know, initial plans is, you know, we have Triple M coming behind that, and we've talked about it before of, you know, with the space that Lehigh does afford us, that campus at Lehigh Senior to stage the freshman class in the portables that are out at Lehigh Senior.
Okay, great. And then I have one other question about the Bonita Springs High School and the value engineering and the cost savings. Can you give a couple of specific examples of what kind of adjustments or changes may have been made to accommodate, to allow for those cost savings?
Absolutely. Initially, it was roof changes, skylight changes, reduction in window changes, sheetrock, which on the interior, we lowered some of the elevations of some of the ceilings in the cafeteria, in the gym, in the auditorium. So we're realizing those savings in terms of concrete, in terms of finish trades on the inside and the elevations they have to work at. We've reduced some of the HVAC, provided HVAC from air handling units that will provide the hallway rather than having independent units in the hallway. We've reduced fill. We've actually dug on-site lakes to acquire fill for other areas. So we continually are not removing anything that affects program at all. We're just trying to be more cognizant of how we're spending our money. Do we really need to have a deck up at 30 feet, or can we live with 22 feet? And there's substantial concrete and structural steel savings in those items. We've reduced
and then you will realize some savings in energy moving forward, because you're not having to cool as large of a, you know, not nearly the square foot capacity of a room that you know, when you lower the ceiling, as an example, it doesn't cost as much to.
That is correct. And in many of the academies, we have the open ceiling concept. We didn't do it in medical because of reasons that they need a little cleaner surface area, but we're saving on that. We're utilizing duct socks instead of ductwork in the gymnasiums. We've lowered the ceiling in the cafeteria. It didn't need to be what it is in our standard prototype high schools. And we get those savings from the trades not having to work up on scissor lifts at 30 feet and to access that. So we changed some of our specs on bleachers. It's a quality bleacher, but we saved $150,000 by using a round tube instead of a square tube bleacher system. So we start looking at trades division was able to reduce some of the IT cable with their blessing, going from a Cat 6A to a 6, I believe. Substantial savings in that. So we just keep attacking every item. We have running lists of things, and as a group, we never short-circuit the process. Everybody has input, but when it's a beneficial credit to the district, we're going to take it. And we'll use these concepts moving forward in future school design as well.
So thank you for that. And I know you explained that to me one time before, and I wanted to ask the question for the viewing audience so that they would understand, because I've been asked that question several times. And actually, there hasn't been any actual floor footage sacrificed. It's been more in the elevation and the
correct. That's the
height of
VE we've been taking. That's
right,
correct.
which then renders a number of other savings, like Dr. Atkins says, the energy in the future, et cetera.
Correct. We have, to answer Ms. Patrica's previous question, I'm on site at every weekly job meeting. For the last 6 months, these job meetings run anywhere from 3 to 4 hours long. Tina Silcox is the facility engineer in my absence running that, but I'm out every week. That's where all this VE occurs. It's the architect, it's the construction manager, it's our staff all involved, it's the engineers, and going through every item. And these meetings last literally 3 hours and have been going on for the last 6 months and will continue to go on until we're complete.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good question. Ms. Giovanelli?
So this is for the for the audience as well. The Hawthorne piece of property, I don't know that everyone knows what happened to that. So if you could just shed a little light on that, the outcome of that.
I can speak to that, Ms. Giovanelli. I believe you're referring to the entrance off of Shangri-La, not the Imperial Parkway entrance. That entrance is intended for bus traffic only. When we did a study of the number of buses we will need coming from, I believe, the east side of Shangri-La, it was much less than what we expected. After doing an additional traffic study and engaging Johnson Engineering to do some calculations for, I believe it's up to 5, 6, 7 buses maximum, I believe, we'll have coming in there. There was no need for a turn lane for that. They can turn right from Shangri-La without posing any danger to the traffic. So we didn't need the turn lane, which caused us to have some savings. We didn't have to develop that piece of land. We also didn't need to get that conveyed to us from Hawthorne. But I will share with you, I did get a message from the Hawthorne administration, their HOA, last June in regards to their want and desire to talk with us about conveying that property to us because they see no need for them to keep it in their ownership. So he suggested that when a majority of the HOA is back, their residents are back in the winter time, possibly in December, that he would open up that discussion with them and work on a plan to convey that property to us. So there's an opportunity for us to pick up that property, hopefully at no cost to us, and take it off their hands because they no longer need it. So it's a win-win for both of us.
And I have one more. So, and this is to all of you, I think, because I started thinking, so with the Estero property that we're selling for the traffic light for the offset of that, how is that a savings to the Bonita property and how that transpires and everything? So if y'all could, for the community, I mean, for the audience as well, if you could explain that.
In the GMP that we just approved, 5, that is in the total project cost, the value for that traffic signal. Once Greg's division works on that property closing, I'm not sure where that money will come back, but it will come back to the district.
We're essentially selling, and that's in your board agenda items for later tonight. That property is being sold to the county, and that money comes to the district. And so, in the traffic signal, actually there isn't a traffic signal where the Hawthorne property is. This is on Imperial Parkway, which was going to be part of the project cost, which could be sent right, to help further savings on the high school. But essentially, we're selling that piece of property to Lee County. It's a win-win for both parties, as it aligns right along with their current park structure at Estero Community at the rec center there, and then the sale of that property then comes back to the district.
I just want to bring that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, board members? Well, we have a lot of decisions to make, don't we? Thank you. Nice, thorough presentation. We have a lot now to work on.
Thank you, board members. Dr. Atkins.
Okay, board members, we shall move to public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak at public comment tonight? One. Jamie, you want to come forward? We need a microphone on.
Be on. Try again.
Okay. Jamie Michael, I'm president of SPALC, but I'm speaking as a taxpayer. We always hear so much negative, but after the hurricane, I want you to know that I called transportation in regards to a safety issue. There was a tree in my neighborhood that had branches that were 8 or 10 feet high, and kids were climbing them, and I called transportation, and I don't know what they did. It was fixed the next day. Safety.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And now we move to board members' comments. Ms. LaRiviere, we'll start with you and go around that way.
Okay, good. It's been busy. It was so neat. I was wishing I had someone there to record the Three Oaks Elementary SAC meeting because it would have been a great model for all of our other SACs to see how it's run and how they collaborate between staff members, community members, and questions. It was a wonderful. It was a great time to be there and to see community member engagement and staff members very well articulating what they knew about their stuff and being able to explain pieces to community members. I was, and when I'm talking about staff, it was the teachers. They had the chairs come in to be able to address some of those concerns and questions. It was amazing. And then that Friday night, I went to the Dunbar and Mariner game, and Mr. Burnside and Dr. Butts were almost to the point of placing bets on whether or not I would come out in the storm, but I did, and I'm so glad that I did. It was wonderful to see how for both schools, the coaches and the principals were all about, this is about a learning experience for these kids. It's not about the winning, it's not about the losing, it's about the character building. And so it was great to see that attitude, but the best part was at halftime. Because of all of the rain and everything, and it was still drizzling, they didn't want anything to happen to the instruments. So both bands got together just before halftime began. And I was looking behind me and I'm thinking, why are they showing each other their stuff? Both bands came out together and they did each other's routines together for certain parts. It was a powerful statement to just see how they could collaborate and do an amazing job right off the cuff. And so kudos to their directors, and the principals were surprised. They had no idea what was going on. Then the next Monday, Mary Fisher spent more time there than I did. I wasn't able, so I'll let her speak more to that. But I did greet the counselors, social workers, and school nurses who were here for a training on LGBTQ. I don't want to use the word issues. That's not the word we want to use. On how to best serve the concerns of students who are at that place. It had nothing to do with what you thought about things. It had to do with how we treat people as individuals and how we understand where they come. And principals were there. And so I just appreciated the fact that we saw so many people involved with that. Had the pleasure, I met my mentee for the first time, delightful young lady. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Immediately, staff members and I started thinking about, okay, what can we brainstorm for this? Because the child's grades are fine, but we needed to tap into where her strengths were and get her tapped into areas of her interest. And so that was amazing. I had a long trip to Gainesville for the FSBA leadership training and for the development of our legislative platform. And had a teaser of who's going to be speaking at the conference in November. Bill Latham was one of the co-authors of Humanizing the Education Machine. And he spoke, and it was powerful to hear what he had to say. Also hearing about how we need to reconsider what we do with our school environment and training our teachers to know they can do different things, not just what's always been done. Thinking outside of the box, also discussed the, I'll send it to you, and I will send you a memo. It was a very full-time, very good. Then we had the pleasure of, there are 2 new lobbyists working with FSBA. Andrea was able to, for the first time, be invited to meet with Education Committee and answer questions and have this interaction and this interchange. Kim McDougall is one of the lobbyists, one of the 2 that is actively working with them to help with those development of relationships. I was very impressed with her. And one of the things she said, guys, people are coming to you to educate their kids. You should never feel threatened about the charter schools. Now, she used a scenario of an explanation of how, she said, but you provide the highest quality, the best package for the community. You need to make sure the community knows that. You need to be talking about who we are, what it is that we do, and emphasize that rather than living and having a level of anxiety. Gave some powerful suggestions on ways to interact, develop relationships with our legislative delegation and other legislators throughout the state. So it was a very powerful, good time together. We had the best planning time of breaking down how we were going to choose the platform. It was the most organized time. I told Ms. Fisher, much better than what we've seen before. And then on Monday, Dr. Atkins, Mark Mora, and I had the pleasure of being part of the Lehigh Acres Municipal Services Improvement Agency to work on what we need to do in Lehigh. And we found, and people realized in this type of a scenario, Lehigh Acres needs to be prepared. And what we as a community need to do in our pre-planning to help assist the people along the way, not just the people who live in our community, but those who come. And so there's this energy, there's this synergy of what we can do to be very proactive and do a better job of meeting the needs. Talked with Sandy from EOC at that meeting, and we were saying that, if Lehigh's already got this energy and Bonita's getting this energy, it creates a format for our other communities as well. Executive DAC, we planned our future meeting on November the 15th. And at that meeting, there were two questions that came up. It's amazing. They come to plan and then other things that people hear on the outside. So Dr. Atkins, I forgot to mention this to you yesterday, so I would like to share those. There was a voice of concern about students at the elementary schools not receiving the fruit and veggie distributions. So that's a question they were wondering, is that going to be able to continue like they used to get, like strawberries sent to their classroom and different broccoli pieces to try out in their classrooms. And then at a lot of our schools where there's a high population of parents who are struggling with language, when they hear free lunches are only going to be provided to our students through the media until November, I can't remember the date, time, they're thinking, oh no, we're not going to get the free lunches that we always used to get. So we need to make sure that we're doing a good job of getting a communication out there that those schools that are already on the community plan are still going to receive that. There was some anxiety about that. And then there's a rumor mill out there going that we may be facing cuts in our food budget because of food that we lost and food that we had to give out. So so those were concerns that were brought up. So somewhere along the way, it would be great to give them some information on that.
Yeah, we can certainly check into that. I've not heard anything like that that has been reported to me, but certainly I'll get with Dr. Desmore is also shaking her head no, but we'll get with Mr. Stelmacki and just make sure that's the case.
Thank you.
Mr. Toiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several things. So I attended the DAC from Ms. LaRiviere, and I kind of tried to fire him up a little bit pursuant to what the board is trying to achieve as far as that we are now doing something different. And I'm going to get, when I get to the CAC, the same type of thing, but they had the same concerns. And I told them that, we have to get out there and charge our parents and charge our teachers and charge our schools and inform them what we've just learned today as far as our budget crisis. And I told them a little bit about how, you know, HB 7069, why we're doing what we're doing, the importance of it, and the severity and the impetus that if we don't change what's happening in public education, public education will change fundamentally for everyone and not in a good way. And so that we have to inform and educate our people, and the response of the DAC was what, where, and how. So they're ready for us, and then the CAC with the same type of thing, but they even went one step further, and I want to challenge this board. You know, we have a lot of talented people in our DAC, and we have talented people in all of our committees. I mean, we have authorities in that particular realm, and they kind of sat me down and in the curriculum and said, look, we've got, you know, educators from all the colleges, we've got, you know, parents and all sorts of very talented people, and we go to these committees, we give great presentations, and then we send them home. And they're like, that's not what we're here for. We appreciate the committees, you know, and the information that's being given to us, but that's not why we're here. We're here to help you. And they said, you know, Mr. Troiber, when you go to a meeting, you don't go to a meeting without a desired outcome at the end of the meeting. And we all know that that's not, you know, every meeting we attend, we have a reason why we're there. And yet we go to these advisory committees and we don't do the same thing. We don't formulate problems at the board level, go to the particular committees and say, here's our problem, we need solutions, and give them pointed issues of what they need to address, you know, for the construction, whether or not we should go to bigger schools and the pros and cons of that, you know, the curriculum, what are we doing, you know, the certain issues that are touching in our curriculum issues that we're dealing with. We need them to help us give us solutions, and I think we need to give them more what issues need to be addressed. And I think we should really workshop that committee by committee and really form a focus from this board what we expect to get as results out of all of our committees. So that was very clearly articulated to me, and I wanted to pass this to the board, and I told them that I would. So that's for our support committees. I attended the Lee County Technical College appreciation for all their businesses for their breakfast. I always go to those because Chef Joe just spoils everybody and lets his culinary group do what they do, and that's my pass to go off any type of diet that I have and eat all that they make, and it's all wonderful. And it was great to see not only the future makers attending, but all the business community, and there is just a resounding feeling from our business community that we're not giving them what they need, that we have to elevate our vocational opportunities at our colleges to the same level of our college readiness. When we talk about, you know, career readiness, that has to include college and vocation. Career readiness needs to be synonymous, that they're both equal, that it's not a secondary choice to go to vocation, because in some instances, it's the far better choice for many different career paths, and we need to really articulate that and continue to do that. And they're doing a great job on all the campuses there. We just need to continue to support that. I got to go to the 10th anniversary of the Island Coast. They had a big tailgate party. It was actually their 11th year that they've been in existence, but they called it their 10th year because it was kind of at the end of the 10th. And I was very honored because I was actually there when the school opened, and so I was there at their 10th anniversary, and I got to see when they played the battle against with Ida Baker for the Crosstown Showdown. It was a great event. At that time, I actually got to hear about, and I want to just, it's just one of many, and I'm giving this one out as an example because it just impressed me. But we have this all over our school district, and I just want the public to understand that I'm picking out one. If you go to any one of our schools at any of our levels, there is so many great things going on. For example, this one, Island Coast Senior High School senior Nancy Sapero has been selected at the 2017 Macy's Great American Marching Band. This group represents the best high school members in all 50 states, and she's going to be performing live on the Thanksgiving Day Macy's Parade. Nancy has been a musician since 6th grade and been playing the alto saxophone and the flute, and she's currently in the Island Coast High School Gators Regiment leading drum major. And she'll be playing the alto saxophone in the Great American Marching Band. So this is just one great thing, and I just wanted to give a shout out to her as many as the many others. That it's just, when you go to these schools and you see this stuff, you're just humbled by what our teachers and our educators and our administrators are doing, the opportunities they're providing for our students, and that our students are doing so well, not only locally and state level, but also nationally. I already talked about the MiamiForever.org. I just encourage everybody to go take a look at that, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just have a few things. The advisory committee meeting at Cape Coral Technical College, you're going to talk about that?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I did take a tour of Cape Coral Technical College, and in my estimation, I mean, I spent 2.5, 3 hours out there. Judy Johnson, the director, is a dynamic leader who is really, she's focused on certifications, and certification completions have skyrocketed under her leadership. Am I right about that?
And who we stole from Taylor County.
Yes, I got that history, and she had quite the things to deal with up there as well. I went into, she gave me a complete tour. Nobody knew I was coming. I love it when principals do that. They're becoming CODA accredited, which is the Commission of Dental Accreditation. That's a very, very, very high bar. And Christy Bassett is the instructor there, who is, she's undertaken that huge role, and she's doing it with commitment and passion and excitement, and it's extra work, and she doesn't complain, and it's really a hard accreditation to get. The facilities were really, really amazing. It smelled like a dentist office, which really bummed me out. But I know, but that's a good thing, because we want them to be prepared. Dovetailing some of what you just said, I didn't hear complaints about the preparedness of our students. I heard complaints at the advisory committee meeting and from Judy that we're not producing enough graduates.
Right.
Again, this is
That's what I meant.
a capital issue. We need to expand the programs. We need more places to put more students. She has a 100% passage rate for most of her certification programs. Those who don't pass, which is rare, are allowed to come back almost every time and study for those certifications for free. Not for free, nothing's free in government. For the tuition they've already paid, they're allowed to come back and study. Difficulty finding teachers, surprise, surprise. It's really, really hard to leave the nursing profession that pays a lot more than the teaching profession, right? And it's also hard to leave the nursing profession after 40 years of service at this salary and come in as a teacher, a beginning teacher. So those are, I know I'm just echoing concerns we've already.
Numbers, did you?
The placement numbers?
As far as
100% placement.
placement.
Yes. 100% placement in jobs. Custodial staff, according to Judy, is the best, and I am not going to make a value judgment like that, but I will say they were really, really great. John Trupo down there is the custodial guy, and he, you would never know that a hurricane had been on that campus.
Used to be our guy down here.
Was he your guy down here?
Yes, oh yeah, he's good.
He kind of just walks around with like a bounce in his step, and he's happy to do what he's doing, and he's
amazing.
I mean, every room I was in, I don't know if he was stalking me, but he was there. He was everywhere the whole time. I was really impressed, and obviously Judy's impressed with them too. Network Support Services and Network Systems Program. Carl Bowling, I think he and Trey would know what they're talking about, because I have no idea what they're talking about in these programs. But the problem here is that we're preparing our students so well at the beginning of these programs that they're leaving before they complete their certifications, which hurts us, which is kind of ironic because we're doing such a good job with them at the beginning that employers are poaching them out of the program before they've graduated. Does that make sense? And some of those employers are actual Lee County agencies, so we should maybe tell them to please stop doing that, or ask them to please stop doing that.
Or do some type of internship.
Or encourage them to finish,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's really, really hard once you have the ability to earn a good living, to stay in school. But if we could work better with our, whatever. Pharmacy tech program, this was for real. Like, these people are filling prescriptions. These people are putting drugs into IVs for people in hospitals. This is, I mean, I didn't know that that's what a pharmacy tech did. Terry Reisinger is the teacher over there. She's got a lot of responsibility training these students to do what they're doing. And you mentioned the level of preparedness students need in order to go into these programs. The Lexile level required for a pharmacy tech student or a medical assisting or a dental assistant, really, really high, as high, if not higher than what's required for college readiness.
That's right.
Really, really good instruction going on there. And the students, every classroom I walked into, the students seemed to really love their instructor. There was true engagement going on. The veterinary assisting program is sadly located in a portable. It's the only program that's in a portable, and I just felt like they were the redheaded stepchild of the program. But again, another indication of our capital needs.
Right.
If we could bring them in, she believes she could double the number of graduates that we have in that program.
I wonder,
And find jobs for all of them.
Mary, I wonder, they're in the process of putting in a animal clinic, a no-kill animal clinic in Cape Coral.
Right.
Maybe there can be some synergy that they house our program and we work their animals. I'll get with their board.
Great.
Great idea.
Wonderful. The nursing assistant program, Marianne Enns is teaching that program. She's really good. You know how you walk into a doctor's office and the lady at the front desk is like, here, fill out the paperwork, and she gives you a bad attitude and you're already mad and you know you have to wait 45 minutes and she makes you more mad. Well, we're training students to allow patients and families to have better experiences when they walk into doctor's offices. And I gotta tell you, the attitude of the kids, I would happily walk into any doctor's office that was manned by one of those students. They really seem to understand that they're the front line and they are the ones who are creating the impression. Frequently, that person who answers the phone or greets you at the door is the most important impression, right? So we're training people to do that well. And then finally, cosmetology. I'm always intimidated when I walk into cosmetology. But there were heads everywhere, like heads.
I know.
Heads of hair everywhere, like rows and rows and rows and rows. And they start on these heads, and then they move to these heads, and then they move to real humans, and they have an actual store where they sell stuff, and they do manis and pedis, and they do actually cut and color people's hair. Just the whole experience to me was really impressive. I was really, really impressed. Couple of community outreach things. I did speak with TALC about our legislative priorities, trying to light a fire under them and tell them about the support they have from the board and the superintendent to become involved in the political process. I went to a TALC town hall that was so poorly attended that I'm still sad about it. Really, I couldn't get anybody in the community to show up, including my own mother, so that was kind of sad. Congressman Rooney, as you guys know, came to the district to acknowledge our staff. I really think he's the real deal. Like, I really think that in terms of the politicians we're dealing with, he is the real deal. And I'm just hoping it was a meaningful experience for staff, because it seemed to be. It was. Good. Law and Order Ball, Greg Blurton. You weren't there, but I got to see you on video. Really impressive event done by the Rotary South, Fort Myers. But what was impressive was our cadets who are there for the Public Safety Academy, and how professional they already are. The way they acted in helping everybody up and down the stairs, and just their presence there was very impressive. We all know that Todd Everly does a great job out there, and the students, I thought, were proof of that. I'm trying to go fast. Tour of Fort Myers Middle Academy. I believe that Lynn Edward is the right leader at the right time out there. I really do. She has brought a renewed focus on data, which sometimes scares people, but she's going to combine that with celebrations of every success by every student. So if a student moves just up, we have 3 levels in bucket in level 5, right? There are 3 buckets inside level 5. So if a student moves from the lowest up to the middle, that's going to be a big celebration. And I think that kind of thing can quickly catch on in a school like that. There was a lot of excitement surrounding the boys' basketball championships. They are now county champions, I will say, which I would have loved to have gone to that game, but I couldn't. Nathan Bueller is a teacher out there who invited me to go. Nathan is engaged in the community. He shows up at a lot of events where I am, and he's very impressive to me. His level of commitment and dedication to the students at that school is second to none. Really impressive. We have a deaf and hard of hearing classroom or program out there. Ms. Yaus is the teacher, and she was actually, it was her goal in life to teach deaf golfers how to golf. And she's now coaching golf out there. So she came about the job in sort of a backwards kind of way, but when I walked in there, there were 3 volunteers in the classroom, and it was really cool. They taught me how to sign hello and goodbye and thank you, and I can't do it, but it was a very impressive group. Miss Andrea Gishazo has been recommended for Teacher of the Year out there. She is ELA, and she is a product of the Lee County School District. She started as a para, she became a clinic assistant, she went on to receptionist, and then a teacher, and now she's a teacher leader. So exactly what we're trying to accomplish with our ECHO program, we see personified in her. And she's like, you walk in that classroom and forget about it. You want to go back to school and learn from her because she's so energetic and awesome. And 2 more people, James Whitfield, the building supervisor, just loves his building and wants it to be better. And Curtis McCarter is the Title I Parent Involvement Specialist, and he is, you could probably walk him down every single school in that neighborhood, and he's going to know every single person that lives there. Yeah. He knows what their needs are, he knows how to talk to them, he knows how to get them involved, how to get them engaged, and I was really impressed with him. I only have a few things left. Everglades City School down in Collier, I took a trip down there with Stephanie Lucarelli from the Collier School Board, and Dr. Carlin gave me some materials to bring to them, you know, like school supplies and that kind of thing. I was shocked when I drove down there. Picture the 2 days after the hurricane in Lee County. That's what it looks like in Everglades City. You still have garbage and debris in the median. The school looks great, but the community itself is still quite devastated. I was really lucky the day I went. We sorted Halloween costumes that had been donated by somebody in Collier County, and then we got to hand them out, which was really cool. The 5th graders were a little picky, but the pre-K kids, it didn't matter what you gave them. Their whole face lit up. It was really cool. And then we also gave the teachers some things to fill their treasure chests, which the teachers were very appreciative of. So that was a great opportunity to work with our sister district to the south. I went to the all-county chorus. Lee Byer is probably not here, but it was so awesome. And this leads me to a discussion about North Fort Myers Academy for the Arts. Dr. Millens out there. I actually went to his school after the hurricane when he was doing community outreach and serving meals. And that man has such an incredible passion for the community that he serves. And he knows that community incredibly well. And that school, you could have eaten dinner off the floor. That's how clean it was, even after it had served as a shelter. So anyways, I'm out there with Dr. Millens, and he's not shy. And he was like, you just wait, North Fort Myers Academy, you're going to hear a lot about us. That's right. So I'm at the concert, and several of his students were in the chorus. So every time one of his students was announced, he leaned over and looked at me like, I told you you'd hear about my academy. So anyways, I really like him, and I love what he's doing at the school out there. I went to a school vouchers presentation by the Coalition for Quality Public Education down in Collier County. The Coalition for Quality Public Education is an activist group that supports traditional public education. And if we could clone them and create that group up here in Lee County, our jobs and our lives would be so much easier. The speaker said, who in here has been in a public school in the past 6 months? Almost every hand went up. And she said, I never go to a group where that's the answer. Nobody's ever in public schools. And this is a group of people, they don't work for the school district. They're just taxpayers, community members who are engaged and excited about public education. I know, you're shaking, how do we do that here? Yeah. So I'm going to go down there and spend some time with them and figure out how they did that. Yeah. One interesting little tidbit piece of information. I'm in the state of Florida, and I did look at the citation for this, so this information is correct. 4,270 public schools in the state of Florida right now, 43 of which are F-rated. There are, compare 4,270 to 652 charter schools, 30 of which are F-rated. So proportionally, it's kind of an odd relationship. I did see Senator Passidomo this morning. She did not offer to give us $440 million in capital funds, which is what I was hoping for, but we did have a tiny little victory. She will be sponsoring our ECHO legislation. So we now have a sponsor in the House and in the Senate, and now it's up to us to go out and, you know, like an army of ants, get everybody as excited about these programs as we are. I have not yet heard back, Mary, help me, from Senator Benaquisto. I'm trying to get a meeting with her, between Mary emailing her and me calling her. We've not been successful. Representative Fitzenhagen called the other day while I was driving to her office for a meeting to cancel, and we've not yet rescheduled that. Representative Rodriguez has not yet rescheduled, am I correct? That is correct. Representative Caldwell and I are playing phone tag. We're going to have a phone meeting. I do want to thank him for his support of our bill, and I will do that, but I also want to address his persisting concerns about the management of our money. Representative Eagle will also be meeting with me probably, no, I want to try to get a staff meeting with him. Mary's working to get that done, and Senator Grimsley doesn't seem interested in meeting with any of us, so I will continue to pursue that and see where we get. Finally, the Estero Comprehensive Plan. I spoke with the Estero Council this morning, and they are including Lee County School District in their comprehensive plan, which I think is fantastic. I sent Dr. Atkins a link, and he's going to have his staff look at it. We want it to be really, really broad, but Nick Bedos and I have been working, meeting and working, and we're getting to the point where we're going to get staff together to hopefully draw up some kind of an agreement that we can put on paper and have it be binding on both entities in terms of forming a good partnership there that can then be replicated in other municipalities across the district. Awesome. That's my report. Thank you, I think.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's it.
It is. Look at this.
Ms. Giovanelli.
Mine's not near as long. I went to SIDS training at LAMP. Oh my goodness. I learned a lot, like some things that I do wrong with my grandson. So I would hope that others would do that and attend that because it was very educational for me personally. So that was awesome. I've been to several football games, Ida Baker versus North, and North killed them. We won't talk about it too much because it was a rainy day. South Fort Myers and Gulf Coast, they beat them as well, and that was a district game, right? So that was like awesome. So that was a very exciting game as well. If anyone has ever attended a Cypress Lake Middle pep rally, highly encourage that. Especially at Cypress, Principal Minisako and her staff are very energetic. We'll just leave it at that. The Law and Order Ball. You didn't mention about the Edison Park SRO that Jennifer Gayton was a nominee, and that is actually an honor for the district to have someone like that nominated for such a heroic. She's a hero at Edison Park, so it's nice to know we have. Not everybody's a hero and gets recognized that are heroes. So you know what I mean. So that was exciting just to see that alone. Went to the NAACP dinner. That was a packed house.
It was full.
Packed. I actually lost my seat. It was so packed. What else I had? Back to you, Mr. Tuber. I went to the Finance Advisory meeting, and they actually want me to bring back to the board what do we want them as a board to do.
Right.
So
They want to
we need to give them direction, and that's what they're asking for. So I agreed because I couldn't even answer that for them because we should have an agenda, and we need to give it to them because they're very engaged, and they want to work with us and help us. So they're like, what are we here for? What is our purpose? So that was really exciting, and I think that's something that we can do as a good group. That's what we're here for. So, and that's all I got. Your turn.
Ms. Fisher.
Okay.
I talk fast.
Yes, you do. Well, as the recovery from Irma continues, our schools are back creating that everyday normal environment for our kids, and it's been very busy. I do want to say that our Cape Coral Mayor's Scholarship Fund, which is in its 35th year, has now added career and technical scholarship opportunities in response to our business community saying we need kids who are trained in skilled trades, hospitality, medical that does not require a 4-year college, etc. I had a meeting with the Economic Development Director in Cape Coral, and he echoed a lot of those needs, and so I shared his information with Dr. Atkins to share with the appropriate staff so that they can do some negotiating, because he's looking to have some input from the city, which, you know, is growing in leaps and bounds, even though not as much as the East Zone, so that we can let the technical college know what our needs are, and they may be able to help us in expanding. I had the privilege of attending the West Zone Principals Meeting, which was hosted at Mariner Middle School. Rachel is doing an awesome job there, but it was very interesting, and I have to say that the creativity, the energy, and the long hours that those administrators work really needs to be commended. And I also visited Fort Myers Middle Academy, I think the day before you did. And yes, the data thing, we have a high minority population there, but very high expectations. And the celebrations are going to include, Principal Edward is going to be moving a booth and some high top tables to the cafeteria so that kids who move, make learning gains, achieve, do something positive to help one another will be able to celebrate in the cafeteria by having that special seating, so that, and it's a real incentive. She continues to build a culture there that, I mean, I was aware of it the minute I stepped foot on campus, that there was a growth in the culture and people are just enthusiastic and smiling and saying that they're happy to work there. So she deserves a gold star this month. Cape Coral Technical College, I also attended the advisory committee breakfast on October 18th. So I received a letter from Chef Jack and all 14 of his students who had helped with the display. Now, my colleagues were there too, and the display was beautiful, included an ice carving. It really, not only did it look good, but it tasted good. And I think Mrs. Patrica said it's kind of like the fine dining experience.
Does a great job.
Yes, he does a really good job. So a shout out to Chef Jack Ilias at Cape Coral Tech. I also had an opportunity, along with Mr. Toiber, to go to Calusa Middle School to thank Tony and Kathy Phelan, who own Pinchers, and that organization, and they gave $25 gift cards to every teacher in the district. They are interested in continuing to support our district. She's a former teacher, and they want to pay it forward. So we're going to be good friends with them in the future.
Yeah.
Let's see. I also attended with Mrs. LaRiviere it's Equality Florida, and it was best practices for schools regarding people with gender identity and expression, students and staff as well. It was attended by over 300 of our school counselors, administrators, social workers, nurses, and included some visitors from Sarasota County. It was a very, very well done and informative event. The presenter was Dee Palazzo, and she is the statewide Safe Schools Director. So they provided a lot of resources to our staff to help them moving forward with those issues. And they talked about things such as dress code and restrooms and activities, and the feeling that all students and staff should be empowered to be safe and open about their own expressions at school. So that was a very good event. Not so well attended by our staff, our student services staff, was the Heroin and Opioid Prevention Efforts event sponsored by Hazelton and the Drug Free Coalition. I had an opportunity to participate in the panel to give some information from the school perspective. And in order to get that information, I interviewed teachers, counselors, principals, and found out how is this opioid crisis, which on the very day of this event, our president said is a national emergency. And what are we doing about it in schools? Not much at all. So we really need to take a look at that, because I found out from people in the trenches every day just how it is impacting their students, from the smallest ones. And one elementary school principal told me about how just in the last 2 days before she and I spoke, she received 3 new students, a set of twins whose parents had both overdosed, so now they're in foster care, so they moved to her school because their foster care was located closer to where she is, and another little boy whose mother had disappeared because she had a drug issue, and the father was in jail, so he's now in foster care. So she said, and we have got traumatized children who are not ready to learn. We don't have the resources to accommodate them and take care of them in the way that they need to be taken care of, because with one school counselor and a part-time social worker and nurse, even getting a referral out to the resources available in the community is difficult. So we really need to take a look about what we're doing with that, because there's not one family that's not impacted by this national emergency. So we really need to pay attention to that. Hazelden is willing to help us with resources and training for our administrators and our student services personnel, and they have a lot of free resources and supplies available to us, and gave us a bunch of that, and I shared it with the Director of Student Services. Let's see, where am I now?
Mary, can I interrupt you for a second and tell you, I failed to share with you what Senator Pasadomo said about mental health spending. That might not seem like education spending, but her intention is to increase the services available for counselors in order to help identify students who are in situations exactly like the one you just described. What that's going to look like and how it's going to take shape, it's too early in the session for us to determine that, but it is something that she is very passionate about, and as the chair of the Education Committee, I think we might see some traction. She's requested some data from the district, and maybe you can take the lead on that, because I know this is in your wheelhouse in terms of advocating with her and getting the information that we need. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but...
No, please, no. But I appreciate that, because it's more information that we do need to be aware of. And at the... they called it the Hope event. It took place at the Bell Tower. Former Senator and now State Attorney in Palm Beach, Dave Arenberg, talked about the work he's been doing with that. And frequently, when you have people with substance abuse issues or opioid issues, it's also occurring with a mental disorder or some kind of a challenge. So we really, mental health services, we are 49th out of 50 states in mental health services in Florida, and Lee County is one of the worst counties in the state of Florida. The other thing that really blew my mind, and I wasn't aware of, he had a graph that in yellow, it described all of the people dying from overdoses across the country. And when he took all of those yellow dots, our state of Florida was totally yellow. 10 people a day die of opioid overdoses in this state. I had a talk with Rebecca Hamilton, who is our 20th Circuit medical examiner, and she said oftentimes she has got to ask for space from other counties because we have so many people coming in dead of overdoses. So it is a big issue, and it does impact our students and our staff and their families. So, and we have the captive audience, and I think that with the mental health issues, I had attended, Dr. Atkins, what was the schools who had, gosh, they presented one day at ALC, and it was Colonial, our
Project Yes?
Right. It was,
yes,
it was
okay.
a Project Yes.
So
request.
every one of those principals that day, when they presented, and that was probably more than a year ago, okay, they said that their number one need was mental health services for their kids and their staff. So, you know, I think it's incumbent on us now to take a stand and move forward and do whatever we can by collaborating with whatever's available in this community to help.
Mary, just a quick question. I was curious, did Dave Ehrenberg mention anything about infants being born with opioid addiction? Did he have any statistics for that?
He has a lot of statistics, and I've asked him to send me his slides. And I digressed and didn't get to the final thing about the graph. So when his graph took all the yellow dots, we had Florida with a bar this high, compared with all other states, less than half of what Florida is. And he attributed that to all of the marketing that was done years back by Purdue Pharmacology, where they convinced doctors that opioids were not addictive. And so, back to Senator Pasadomo, and I know that there are people looking to put bills forward to improve mental health services, and I think that we need to support that in any way we can.
Mary, what's different about this effort, though, from what I could gather from her, is that this is not going to be an unfunded mandate where they're expecting us to provide mental health services. It's a matter of identifying them and then funding the programs outside the district that will provide those services. So they'll give us the money to give us the personnel to identify, and then hopefully give the money to the services outside the district to provide the help.
And I don't know if you guys are aware, but right now we have a Project Success, which is housed in one school in each one of our zones, which is sponsored by the Hanley Corporation, which has a $450,000 per year ongoing grant. And they're going to be providing substance abuse prevention opportunities, parenting groups, and also counseling and therapy for staff members who may have family issues along those lines. And so that's a start. It only scratches the surface, but it's a real start. So on a lighter note, speaking of salaries, I spoke to a young man the other day who said he had applied in the district for a job, and he finally got a call to come and take the job. But he said at this point, because he's working in private industry, he could not take the $14,000 a year pay cut and travel further to come and work for the district, even though he really wanted to. He said he just couldn't afford it because he has rent and family and that kind of thing. So that's just a little backup to the fact that we need to look at other funding sources. And then when Dr. Desamore put her options up there, like I said one time before, I know it by heart because she's been putting it up there for almost 5 years. And we need to step out and really educate the public and move forward with the idea of a sales tax, because every group I talk to almost says it's a no-brainer. So I think it's time for us to be assertive and really go for the gold ring, if I want to call it that. If we continue to borrow money, we're increasing debt that's going to be saddled by our children and grandchildren, and then they're going to be faced with the same situations we're faced with now, so I don't see how that will help anything at all. And on an even lighter note, on Friday, I'm going to Patriot Elementary to read to kindergartners, followed by next Wednesday is our first Student Advisory Committee meeting, and we have representatives from middle and high schools, and we're really looking forward to letting them do some of the things that our other committees do, because they have amazing ideas, as some of our staff who have visited with them in previous meetings have learned. So with that, I want to thank all of our everyday heroes, our staff, our teachers, our support staff, and our students for all the work that they do to make this community a better place. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I am so sorry to say I have nothing to report.
Mr. Martin?
Nothing today, so thank you.
Dr. Atkins?
No further comments from me.
Thank you. We have a performance at 5:45, I believe, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.